welcome to today's virtual event, Mastering Your Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Investment, Moving from Rapid Adoption to Sensible Maturity. I'm Teresa Resick, Vice President of Market Intelligence here at AIIM. Very much want to thank the underwriters who are joining us with our event today. We have ActiveNav, Caligo, Creo, Spark, and Ballo, Gravity Union, Helix Systems, Microsoft, and Ricoh Canada. Thank you very much for our sponsors, and folks, thank you for joining us today. I'm so looking forward to today's event. Just have a few logistics with you here today. This is a new platform for me here at AIIM, and it's new for the virtual events. So thank you for bearing with me as I get used to all of the controls here. But more importantly, here's the lay of the land for you. Encourage you to open the chat, because this is where you can certainly message with each other, with us at AIIM. But this is where I and my colleague Kate is going to be posting links throughout the day, just so that you can access the resources. We always have good resources to share in these events. Cool stuff from AIIM, our speakers, and also the underwriters. There is the agenda doc that's in there. So that has the full outline of what's coming when, and a little bit about each of those sessions. I do encourage you to ask questions of the speakers as we go along. And please use the Q&A feature for those questions. We will be taking your questions after each speaker, and if we don't have enough time in their session, the speaker will follow up with you after the event. If you do need to step out, encourage you to please take a feedback survey. I always value your feedback in here and always want to know how you think we've done today. Look in the chat for the URL for the feedback survey, and it's also going to launch at the very end of the event. But I just want to give you access to that throughout our time today. And yes, we are recording things, and we will send you the link to the replay so you can catch it all again. We'll have that link in 1 to 2 days for you. Something new that we're trying out today, and this is crowdsourcing our note-taking. I have a shared document created. The link is dropping in the chat feature right now, and this is where we encourage you to all take notes on what we're hearing today and do this together. This is just a screenshot of when I first set this up. You're welcome to add your name next to those notes or not, and my intent is just for us to work together. So jot out what we're learning, and I'll certainly share this document after the event. I'll share it in our online community. So just let's see what all we can come up with together today. Now, just about to get things started, do you want to introduce our MC that we have? Kevin Crane is back with us again. Kevin is the host and producer of the AIIM on Air podcasts. And as you know, he is the author of many of AIIM's ebooks, tip sheets, and infographics. And I love working with him. I consider him my partner in crime in all that we do here at AIIM. And just Kevin, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Teresa. Crime it is, yes. It's great to be with us today, with everyone today. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Well, you know, I love to start things off with polls. So let's go ahead and do a poll right now before I turn things over to you. So here,
Great.
let me go ahead and launch the poll.
Please.
And it's saying here, what TV show best describes how well your organization is mastering Microsoft 365? Is it Stranger Things? I'm in the Upside Down and it's scary over here. Arrested Development. Struggling a little bit whether there's money in the banana stand or not. Jeopardy. What is feeling confident for 600? Law and Order. No need to plead the fifth. I'm an expert. So just looking to see how well you feel not only your knowledge of Microsoft 365 is, but how well you're employing it within your organization. Just going to give a couple of seconds there for those answers. And but just Kevin, what are you seeing with all of this? What do you think?
Well, I know that I would have thought Jeopardy would have been the biggest category, but it's interesting to see that folks are still struggling a bit, and I think that'll be good for us today, since we'll be exploring a great number of aspects around Microsoft 365 and the whole suite of capabilities there. But I'm not surprised to see that folks are maybe a little upside down and struggling a little bit.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and close the poll here. Oh, sorry, there's the results there. I'm sorry, sharing that out real quickly with everyone. My apologies for that. And so that just is what Kevin was saying. More than half the folks are, or about 42% of the people are saying that that they're So wait, what, 73%? Need to put my math hat on here that we're struggling. So let me go ahead and stop sharing the results. And Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and let you take things from here today.
Take over, let's get going today. Well, thank you, Teresa. Again, thanks everyone for being here for another really great AIIM virtual event. I'd like to introduce a video that we have from Peggy Winton. If you're familiar with AIIM, you certainly know Peggy. Peggy is the president and CEO at AIIM. And as you know, AIIM just has recently released a new information watch, maximizing your Microsoft 365 and SharePoint investments. And Peggy is going to give us a summary of her findings and her views from the information watch, and share some of the feedback from an expert panel of information professionals that participated in the research. So Teresa, can we see that video from Peggy now?
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. I'm Peggy Winton. You won't be surprised to learn that just about every organization of size has some Microsoft 365 environment. It could be Office alone, it could be SharePoint, Teams, etc. And something tells me you're one of those users, or you wouldn't be joining us today. We conducted some research on this adoption at the end of last year and found that indeed over 90% of organizations were currently using or plan to use some combination of these Microsoft elements. So you could say that M365 enterprise presence has really become ubiquitous. Only 7% say they don't have it in their organizations. Naturally, our current COVID crisis has forced organizations to completely rethink how they view remote work, how they support their remote workers, and provide productivity systems in order to keep work going. One of the clear beneficiaries of this mad dash to remote work is Microsoft. And in particular, the rapid evolution of Microsoft Teams as a front end to collaboration, information sharing, and knowledge management. Gosh, that's a term that's come back into style, isn't it? It's caused that adoption number to absolutely explode across the entire M365 platform, both in more users and in broader utilization among existing users. And while this massive growth has obviously done some wonderful things to enable thousands of organizations to maintain connectivity and productivity, it also presents some new levels of complexity and new challenges. You can't have that kind of enterprise scale adoption at that frenetic pace without finding that a few of the necessary steps between deployment and full adoption are not always followed. And that certainly is the case here. Some would even call it an unmitigated mess. Now, we're not here to pass any judgment at all. And in fact, I should say, we're not here to endorse Microsoft 365 or in any way suggest that it is the only content and process management solution in the marketplace. Of course not. But given this crazy fast and deep adoption, we really think that it warrants taking a hard look at how the presence is maturing, certainly in the AIM community and beyond. So consider this event an invitation to learn how to master your own M365 investment so that you can truly realize the promise, truly realize its potential that your business is going to need, and how it might change in the next few months, and in fact, over the next few years. So in the time we have together, I want to share what I think are the most important data points from the research. And while I'm at it, I'm going to cut through some of the wishful thinking that often accompanies these kinds of conversations about software platforms, so that we get to the bottom of the real issues. We maybe cut through some of the hype, and talk about how people really are using it, what obstacles they might have, and maybe some real good success stories. And I'm going to do that by calling out some of the conversations that we've had with members of our own AIM community, and not just any members, but those who have earned the very coveted CIP designation. That's our Certified Information Professional. That's AIM's own, very own certification that we think represents the key intelligent information management disciplines and mastery thereof. So these are your peers. These are your peers in local government, in federal government, in manufacturing, oil, gas, and financial services. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to ask Kevin to use the same research and walk you through the key conclusions that we reached. So I hope that sounds okay. Now, before we talk about the specific role that M365 has in this new work environment, let's focus a little bit on just the broader context of cloud and collaboration. After all, that capability is a big differentiator, certainly for these later versions of M365. You know, it was only 7, going on 8 years ago that 24% of organizations using SharePoint told us that they had no plans to move to the cloud. And another 43% of organizations were simply undecided. I can tell you that those days are long gone. When it comes to storage of unstructured and semi-structured information, most organizations have now made the jump to the cloud, and they certainly intend to continue their push there over just the next 2 years. But over half of the organizations we talk to say that just the mere act of migrating from on-premises to the cloud is a real challenge for them. We've had lots of conversations about what makes migration to the cloud so hard. It could be concerns about security or fear that moving will somehow mess up those intricate processes that were initially set up on premises. You've heard the expression lift and shift, and that's not always advisable. Clearly determining your effective migration strategy is super, super important. And our research goes on to show that a hybrid environment might actually be the reality for many organizations. We've hosted a lot of events and had a lot of discussion about good rules of thumb for determining just what information should remain on premises, what information or content should move completely to the cloud, and what should exist in a hybrid repository situation. Our CIP experts said that really you got to think about accessibility, and those groups that resisted efforts to get things off of those cordoned off, dreaded shared drives and into an accessible repository are really paying the price now. They're really, really struggling. And that certainly want to happen when there's a huge rush to get your hands on what you need. You have redundancy, you have rework, and you certainly have sprawl. And when we look at how organizations are actually using M365 for their collaboration needs and their collaboration functions, it's interesting that the focus for most of them is pretty much on collaboration basics still. You'll see there 54%, just file sharing, certainly video participation and sharing is a big one. We're all zoomed out at this point, and simple content authoring are really the top priorities there. But there's really a growing demand and a growing desire to leverage document-centric collaboration, focusing on those processes, those line of business processes, automating how work moves through the organization to support those processes. And like many of you who are on the front line with your customers, I always say nothing screams basics and necessity and speed. I need it now, like a pandemic. So that's a real driver there. And it's an area of challenge and concern for many. Ideally, M365 administrators want to be able to apply flexible protection actions like encryption and access restrictions and visual markings. And the very first thing that our CIP experts say we should be focusing on is digital optimization. How do we get information digitized so that we can then digitalize the processes that surround that information? I think those are just really good words, and that certainly cuts across any platform, any software. So let's switch gears from broad remote working challenges, accessibility, and cloud to dig in a little bit more on the role of M365 in meeting those challenges. There's a rising awareness that rapid adoption of M365 and Microsoft Teams in particular is creating records management challenges. The sheer variety and volume of information being created in M365 is now really a top priority for a good 42% of you. It's chaos. You feel it. So when it comes to records management capabilities that are built in, you all ask that protecting data and information effectively in order to minimize threats through access management is by far your top business driver, even over just basic compliance and risk concerns. And I think this points to the growth in the number of collaborators, both across and outside of organizations. So not really surprising there. And, you know, in order for it to work, we want involvement. Our CIPs said, one of them in particular, if I have to choose between having information that's managed consistently and with proper metadata versus locking down, managing or limiting the number of Microsoft Teams sites, I'll take the former every time. And how often have we had that discussion about the little dance and the struggle between empowering or enabling the business and protecting the business? And a lot of executives, we were told this by the CIP expert panel, a lot of experts are probably unduly concerned or obsessed with the number of team sites. And that's not really the argument that should take place. So just like with other applications and processes, you have told us you want to be able to automatically retain and delete and store data and records in a compliant manner. We've been saying that automation is the only way to manage at scale, and that applies here too. It certainly is the case when we talk about Microsoft Teams. The business really doesn't care or understand if something is a record or not, says our CIP expert panel. They just want to get access to their files. And all of this is much more complicated when working from home. This is our opportunity to finally automate information management. Amen. One of my favorite quotes from one of our members at Raytheon always says, I know I'm doing my job if my business users don't know I'm doing my job. So despite all of these challenges, the role of and the reliance on teams is growing, with 81% of you telling us that teams is a key element to how knowledge work gets done in your organizations. And yet it's really surprising that there's still a good bit of education and change management that's needed to fully explain and leverage the team capabilities. I mean, we see that with so many software tools. We're just not tapping into all the things that it can do. And sometimes it's because it's just so very complicated. So we asked, how is the average user? How knowledgeable is the average user with all the capabilities? And not surprising, there is a lot of confusion. There's certainly confusion when updates are going to happen or when they do. And like with other tools, you need super users and you might need outside help to poke and play around with those features and really think how they apply to your own processes. Otherwise, only a fraction of the capabilities get utilized. And I mentioned you might need some help. And that's really where third-party experts come in. Through the years, our users have recognized the need for third-party providers to ensure that they're really realizing the promise of M365 in general and Teams in particular. And as a platform, SharePoint and now M365 really are the foundations for a rich ecosystem of third-party solutions that build on and leverage the capability of the platforms. And 63% of you said, yeah, we still need something else with that. This has certainly been the case when we talk about governance and records management, where many end users conclude that the native capabilities in SharePoint were just not sufficient to handle those kinds of complex retention and disposition requirements. And third-party partners have been tapped for that. They've also been tapped for integrating with those key horizontal processes. And again, I have to emphasize that's where the customer demands are coming through for just fast response time, actually accomplishing those universal horizontal types of functions. So I'm going to leave you with this piece of advice from our CIP experts, and that is that COVID has obviously forced a lot of our organizations into knee-jerk reactions. You can't imagine how many organizations were simply unprepared for remote work. So a quick rollout of Microsoft Teams helped facilitate that. But planning, and more planning is going to be the key to successfully controlling and managing your M365 and your Teams environment across most of your organizations. Let's just say there's going to be a lot of mopping up. And we know this to be the case for some very large, some very reputable organizations that stood up 1,000-person instances of Teams in a very short amount of time. And you can bet that not all the boxes were checked off. So it's okay. It's not too late to go back and do it right. So what a great segue into our next session, Kevin. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you, Peggy. That is Peggy Winton, President and CEO of AIIM, summarizing briefly some of the findings and her perspectives from the new information watch from AIIM about Microsoft 365 and SharePoint, building value and adoption there. All right. So with all of that said, let's move on and get into our panel of panelists today. We are joined by Rez Kamis, and he will be joined by Vlad Katrinescu. Rez, are you there?
I am.
Hello, Rez. All right, very good. Please go ahead and start sharing your screen while I introduce you to our audience today. Rez is VP of Technology at CryoSpark. And as I mentioned, he will be joined later by Vlad Katrinescu, an evangelist and sales and product support evangelist from Valo. Gentlemen, welcome to the event today. Rez, tell us more.
Perfect. Just can you confirm that you can see my screen? We're good to go?
We cannot see your screen.
Okay, let me just try one more time.
Ah, looks like something is happening. Very good. All right. Looks like, there we go.
Perfect.
Rez Camus from CryoSpark. All right. Very, very good. Please tell us more.
Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone to our session on superpowering your corporate intranet using Microsoft Teams. Before we begin, I just wanted to give a quick intro on what we're talking about here today. Being in the Microsoft 365 digitization business, we're helping tons of organizations modernize their workplaces. We're seeing more and more that businesses are using Microsoft Teams as their main collaboration tool, as well as the latest and greatest modern cloud technology that brings together document management, chat, meetings, callings, devices, apps, and other solutions all in one place. However, until now, corporate intranets have lived primarily as separate browser-based applications. In this session, we're going to talk to you about the Microsoft 365 digital workplace modernization strategy and how you need to have an understanding of how your organizational content and basically making sure that it's communication-based and collaboration-based and understanding the difference between the two. At the end, we want you to understand how using Microsoft Teams as the hub for all of your organizational teamwork in combination with Valo Connect can serve both these communication and collaboration needs and superpower your corporate intranet. So quick introduction. My name is Rez Camus. I'm VP Technology at a company called CryoSpark, where we do Microsoft 365 consulting. Also VP Technology at a company called CloudSpark, where we develop Teams-based apps. And we also have on the call Vlad Kastrinescu, who is the sales executive and product evangelist at Valo, and also a Microsoft MVP. I wanted to start with some common scenarios that we see our clients struggling with during their digital modernization journey when using Microsoft 365. First, organizations just don't know where to start. There's so many services that you get with Microsoft 365, including SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Planner, Projects, and lots of others. When should an organization use one service over another? Also, what services come with their licenses? How should they organize their content and migrate to these services? Second, especially during the pandemic, organizations adopted Microsoft Teams and SharePoint without any upfront planning. So the solution missed the boat on the upfront planning for business and technical governance. It lacks the security and compliance needed. And in the end, their Microsoft 365 environment tends to be misconfigured from a governance perspective. Next, there's low adoption because there's a lack of understanding of all the tool sets, no training or change management for their employees. Furthermore, organizations are inundated with so many repositories they want to move from, and they don't have any strategic migration or decommissioning strategy for these source repositories. There's also an overabundance of communications and conversational tools, but no formal guidance on what tools to use. And they end up back in email, and that's what we don't want to happen. So how do we overcome these scenarios? There's lots of suggestions here, but let's call out some of the important ones. First, we need a clear vision that describes what's important and how the objectives will be achieved. We need fresh, engaging, accurate content, organized in a way that makes it easy to reliably find when the user needs it. We need business and technical governance, and I keep on talking about governance, so people know that they can trust the content and everybody understands their responsibilities, along with the tools clarification on when to use what. We need to define what tools should be used, when, and by whom. We need to ensure the Microsoft 365 implementation has a focus on what the business is all about, their clients, their employees, their customers, their products. We need to organize the Microsoft 365 services to optimize employee productivity. We need to reduce clicks and personalize it so that employees can get to what they need and when to quickly. We need a search that just works. Content is organized in a way that makes it easily found, and search experience are curated to ensure that relevant information is presented to them in meaningful ways. Obviously, we need training, adoption, change management, all that stuff goes together. And lastly, we need an ongoing attention to metrics. We need to provide evidence to our executives that the Microsoft 365 services being deployed are actually used, useful, and providing value. So I love whenever I'm starting an engagement, especially for the digital modernization journey, I always bring this slide to my clients and talking about these 4 important buckets. And this is really key in the planning and design stages of your deployment. So the first being information architecture. So when you're deploying a solution, you want to think of things like the document architecture, the content types, metadata. You want to think about the search architecture. You want, if you're deploying teams, how are we going to organize my teams? How am I going to organize my SharePoint sites? How about the channels and the tabs and the apps within the team? So there's a lot of planning that should be done upfront when you're doing your Microsoft 365 implementation. Second is the technical and business governance, and I'm not going to overkill that because I've already talked about it many times, along with the security and compliance behind it. Third, the migration strategy. The migration strategy is really important from a decommissioning old repository standpoint, and how we actually move the content into the Microsoft 365. Next, obviously, is the adoption, change management, and training. And we want to use all this in conjunction with Microsoft SharePoint and Teams together as your application gateway for both communicating and collaborating in your organization. I like to also use this slide when I'm talking to my customers or just trying to grasp on SharePoint and Teams and all this, and I break it down by communication and collaboration. So on the left-hand side, we've got for our root intranet and functional communication site. So an example I give to my customers is, as any employee, I'll use this site as a launching point to get to all of my organization's internal digital assets and applications and be informed of the latest news and events. So we can see that SharePoint and Teams in combination with Valo Intranet and Valo Connect can meet that. And on the right-hand side, we've got project, collaboration, line of business app, other team sites, and teams. When I need to collaborate with a team, internal or external to my org, I'll create a collaboration team site or a team. And that could be serviced by SharePoint or Microsoft Teams. So a couple of lessons learned. Information architecture must integrate with Microsoft Teams nowadays, especially now during the pandemic where everybody's working from home and they want that one hub for teamwork. It may not always directly reflect the way your organization is structured, so you want to let it be fluid to some extent. And think about end user productivity. We don't want to hinder them. Keep top of mind things like which team sites should be backed by a team, what teams should be created initially for collaboration and conversations, what is the level of security needed for internal and external users and guests, where and how do we surface the documentation? Is it in SharePoint? Is it in Teams? Is it in a tab within Teams? Lesson number 2 is let's try to use Microsoft Teams as the hub for all of your teamwork. We use personal apps to expose things like Valo Teamwork, which allow us to create projects, team sites, teams. Use tabs to expose your document libraries lists. Ensure people don't need to leave Microsoft Teams. And then use the capabilities built into the platform. Now let's actually jump into demo, and I'm going to pass it off to Vlad now.
Thank you very much, Rez, and hello everyone. I'm really excited to be able to show you Valo Connect today. So here I am in Microsoft Teams, which is my hub for teamwork. This is where I talk to colleagues, work on files, even access different parts of line of business applications as tabs at the top. What Valo Connect brings to the table is, first of all, a Teams personal app. And now I know I'm getting into the technical details, but what that means is simply that it's shown here in the left bar. So you can sit along with your calls, chats, or any other tools that your admins might have put there. First of all, let me go on the homepage. So here, as you can see, I'm still in Microsoft Teams, but I'm able to access my intranet, so I can see all of the latest news, the highlighted ones, the ones that are local to me. I can see my events, my polls, things like that. I have access to the full mega menu in my organization. So really, I can access the intranet without even opening the browser. And not only a few pages, I can also get the full content creation experience. So if I maybe want to create a blog, share best practice, or I just work in HR and I love Microsoft Teams, I can create the announcements about a new employee joining next week without ever quitting Microsoft Teams. Something else that is amazing, I also have an enterprise search functionality. I mean, when's the last time you actually went to Amazon, Wikipedia, eBay, and looked for the categories? Probably never happened, let's be honest. So, users love a search-based, a way to find things, and by using Valo Connect, I can, for example, start searching for Valo, for example, and as I type, I actually see the results appear, so it makes for a much better user experience. I can also have quick access to everybody in my organization. I can customize what's important for me, and I can quickly say, show me everybody from the marketing department since I forgot my colleague's name from Finland. And then I can simply go over their name, chat with them via Teams. The beautiful thing about Valo Connect is that it's really in a way the last Teams app you'll ever need because you can bring in, for example, Power Apps inside here. You can bring in other applications such as Teamwork that I have here, which allows me to view all of my collaboration groups, or even Valo ideas in this case. But if you have any custom Teams apps, you can bring them as well. Now, one last thing I want to show you as I see that I'm running out of time. Valo Connect can also be deployed at the team level. So in any team that I am, I can go at the top over here and I can view the home page of that site. I can access those news, I can view the members and more. So really what Valo Connect brings to the table is that not only will Microsoft Teams become the hub of your teamwork, it will also become the hub of all your organizational communications, really allowing your employees multiple choices on how they want to consume content. Maybe some of them want to go to SharePoint, and that's fine. Some of them absolutely love Teams and never want to open another browser in their lives. And this way, they can still have access to all of those company communications without quitting the Microsoft Teams application that they know and love.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vlad. So I'll close off with this. So if anybody has any questions on this, our contact information for both CryoSpark and Valo is there. And maybe we'll pass it off to the moderator if there's any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Rez. Thank you, Vlad. We do have a couple of questions for you. I'm curious, can we personalize our intranet within Microsoft Teams based upon the audience that is seeing it?
Most definitely. So Valo and the intranet are surfaced up and under Teams, but really they're all configured from on the SharePoint side of the equation. So we could leverage the modern audience targeting capability that comes with SharePoint Modern and use groups and all of the cool targeting mechanisms that we have there. On top of that, Valo actually has an additional capability of securing a lot of the content too, so that especially in the mega menu and such, you could do that on top of audience targeting.
And Vlad, why would using Valo Connect be better than using the new Microsoft built-in Microsoft Teams embedded home site app?
Thank you very much for the question, Kevin. That's a great one. So with Valo Connect, you're not only bringing one single page, the homepage of your intranet, inside Teams. You can really bring, yes, you can bring that homepage, of course, but you can bring in that enterprise search center. You can bring in line of business applications. You can even create multiple apps that are targeted to certain people. So if you have multiple brands inside that tenant, they each their own brand, or you can customize it per audience as well. And we've talked about digital workplace a lot today, and I think uh, making sure that everybody sees stuff that's relevant to them is a key part of that, of making everybody more productive.
Can we integrate things like forms and notifications within Microsoft Teams and Valo?
Absolutely. So you can bring in Power Apps, Microsoft Forms, really get that advantage of the Power Platform and all of the solutions that you're paying for already with Microsoft 365. You can bring them to the front and center. So if somebody prefers to go to the browser, they can go to the browser. But there's so many people now that love to just work inside Teams that we wanted to give them that option of getting everything done, accessing internal comms, and accessing line of business applications without quitting the Teams interface they know and love.
All right, very good. Thank you. That is Nerez Kamis from CryoSpark and Vlad Katrinescu from Valo. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's move along to our next presenter today, Michael Schweitzer. Michael, are you there with us?
I'm here.
Hello, Michael. All right, please do share your screen while I introduce you to our audience today. We are joined by Michael Schweitzer, CEO and President of Gravity Union. He's here to talk about Microsoft 365 audit trails and some of the options and some of the possibilities. Michael, please tell us more.
Hi there, yeah, and just double check you can see my PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, can see.
Okay, excellent,
Hear
excellent.
you just fine.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, so I'm the CEO and President of Gravity Union. We are a Microsoft Gold partner. We're a consultancy in the space, and our specialty and passion is around doing large-scale digital transformations into Office 365 and SharePoint with an end game of compliance. And certainly know that the intro this morning certainly was in with us in terms of the issues that we're seeing and what's happening. So thinking about the chaos that's happened over the past year and a bit, and will continue for a while, we certainly have this need to go back to our Office 365 implementation and perhaps wrangle it. And one key tool to be able to do that is certainly going to be your audit trail. So understanding who's creating teams and who's creating SharePoint sites and which ones are actually being used and which team sites were spun up but never had any documents sent to them or never had any conversations. The audit trail is going to give you that insight. And so we have a presentation today that's going to really dive into the Microsoft 365 audit trail. So you have an understanding of the capabilities and perhaps have some takeaways and some actions that you need to do to protect it. So diving into this, moving forward. So if you've been using SharePoint for a long time, you would be aware of the old SharePoint audit trail, and that really captured like 5 different events. And it was add, edit, delete, and view, and some really, really basic stuff. And there were some other, obviously, audit activities captured in SharePoint log files. But from that core stuff that we want to understand, there wasn't really a great central occasion to capture that in a meaningful way. And Microsoft has really doubled down and created a really extremely rich audit trail for organizations to go and find their content. And not only are the individual audit entries themselves super valuable, but the story that they tell. And we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds here. There are literally hundreds of event types. So anything that you're doing in the Office 365 platform is captured in their audit trail. So when we talk about creating sites, creating teams, adding documents, classifying records, declaring records, disposing of records, all that really good information is captured there in the audit trail. And there's all kinds of information too. So they're capturing email addresses and user accounts and IP addresses, timestamps, all the information, all the metadata around each event they're capturing as well. It's quite rich. If you don't have access to your security and compliance center within Office 365, this is what it looks like from a search and export capability. So I can go into the back end and I can filter, and you can see on the right-hand side just how far that little scroll bar is going to go down. There are probably close to 1,000 events there that we can dive into. And so if for example, if we have some missing documents, I can come in here and search for items and see who deleted them and when they were deleted. There's all kinds of stuff that you can dive into here. And so you certainly would recommend that you create a great partnership with your IT team to be able to dive in and gain access to this. Because this isn't only going to tell you how adoption is going, what's happening in the system, and who's doing what, and when things happened. And then we're also getting into the compliance piece as well. So that this can inform us, like how well are our content rules doing. We talk about auto classification of records, etc. So lots of really cool, rich information. And then again, we get into a bit of a story. So each individual document is going to have its own narrative that can be important as well. And so kind of like when you think about banking software, where they never store the your current bank balance in the software, they always calculate your balance based off the historical deposits and withdrawals. And that's sort of a protection standpoint. But taking that mindset, we can sort of calculate the current state of SharePoint or the current state of Teams. So for example, we can do some additions and subtractions and show me all of the documents that have been added to SharePoint sites where we know we've trained the Office 365 Security and Compliance Suite and or a third-party product to classify that content, but yet haven't been classified yet. Or show me the documents that have been added and we think should be a record by now, because for whatever reason, whatever business rule, they've been approved, they've been published, it's been a year, whatever your rule is, you're gonna want to understand what items do we think have been declared and protected but haven't been declared yet. So it's really that aggregation of information that provides the value as well as the individual audit activities themselves. So what does it matter? Well, we may need, there's many various regulatory standards that require you to prove if someone looked at a document or reviewed a policy or saw a contract, etc. And it may be required for evidence litigation or investigations. Again, it can provide insight into adoption, so it'll inform us how people are using it and what they're doing. You know, if we just rolled out a brand new collection of team collaboration sites or brand new SharePoint site for the Human Resources Department, you can go in and see, are they actually using it and how heavily are they using it? And you may kind of curtail some of your change management strategies and react to that information. And again, it really does provides us insight into compliance, right? So we can start to do reports on, well, how many documents do we have for a given record category? And what percentage of our documents are recorded as records? And go show me all the old documents that are over 2 years old and that suspiciously should have been declared perhaps and classified by now. So lots of cool stuff that we can get from the audit trail. Some real world examples. We do this actually internally. We created a report that shows us all the items that were deleted just for fun. And kind of going through that report, I found a bunch of documents that were deleted. And so I went to talk to the end user, and it turns out that in January, I guess they clean up their desktop every January to get start the new year. And a couple of the folders on their desktop were synchronized with SharePoint. And so they had forgotten to take the additional step of disconnecting that local synchronized desktop folder with the SharePoint library. And they had accidentally deleted several hundred documents that had to do with one of our big digital transformation projects last year. And we always love to obviously keep that for our clients, or maybe refer back to design patterns or solutions and leverage that intellectual property for future projects. So we were able to go back, understand what happened, and train that person on what they did wrong and how to improve things, and communicate this out to end users. We had a client at one point, and they had basically lost their head researcher, and they were acting a bit suspicious and went to go work at a competitor. To go in and dive in and see, okay, well, what was this person looking at before they left? Like, were they looking at projects or research projects that they weren't involved in? And then the company was actually able to send some scary legal language to the new company and say, hey, FYI, we're aware that basically your new hire has downloaded a bunch of intellectual property of ours, and just as a reactive measure, you want to be aware of that, and you better not go to market with those products. And then we had a company who was in the nuclear business in Canada, and within Canada, we have something called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act, which is hard to say fast. And there's actually a rule in Canada that you cannot leave the country with any kind of information that has anything to do with nuclear technology, of course. And so because there's a bit of a culture of fear in the organization that if I leave the country with my work cell phone or my work laptop, I might accidentally bring some information outside. Or maybe I've got my laptop and it's logged into the SharePoint so that it has the information, and I go to Hawaii and I open up my laptop and it's going to automatically perhaps synchronize some files. And so, you know, in that case, they wanted to dive into and look at the IP addresses and see where people were logging in from to double check that they were being compliant with some of these rules that we have. So lots of really interesting stuff that we can pull out of it. And the more you save, and the more you dig into it, the more ideas you'll have about how you can pull out. So some interesting stuff and some things of note that you may not be aware about. Depending on your license within Office 365, the Microsoft platform, Microsoft 365 now, E3 and below only save 90 days worth of audit trail stuff. And this is probably going to be a concern for compliance savvy or compliance-aware organizations. And so it's something for you to aware. With an E5, you can do a 1-year audit trail by default, and then there's an add-on you can do to configure Office 365 to store some audit entries based off user, based off record type, etc., for a little bit longer. But this may not meet the needs of a lot of organizations. Like typically, and in a lot of cases, you have an especially with the big scary lawsuits, I might need to go back 2 or 3 years and see who looked at a policy or procedure or who looked at a contract and made that business decision. So something to be aware about. You can download it, as we saw before. So you can go and search and download. There's certainly some caveats. I believe there's a limit to 50,000 audit entries per download, and many organizations would have more than 50,000 audit entries on a given day. And here's an example of creating an audit retention policy. So we can still go up to 10 years. Again, you may want to store that information for longer. You may even store that information permanently. So some considerations you probably want to think about. At a minimum, make a decision as an organization if you need to archive those audit trails. Are you going to go download them? There are some third-party products as well that will help back them up. You'll want to consider placing audit trail entries on hold. So if you have a document on hold in Office 365, depending on which platform you're using for the records management dimension of your solution, your content, that the audit trail may or may not be protected. So that's something you want to be aware about, because you wouldn't want to have a bunch of content that you sent out for discovery, but then lose the audit trail entries for that content. The notion of anonymizing your audit trail. So oftentimes you may have documents that become records and then run through their natural life cycle and then get disposed at the end of their retention period. And you know, if you have the audit trail entry for that document, even though you've done your due diligence, you still may be called upon to produce that audit trail as evidence during litigation, even though you no longer have the document. So that can pose a bit of a risk. So you probably have sort of 2 options there that you may want to consider. One, the first would be to anonymize the audit trail. So if your organization sees value in that audit trail and you want to see that historical trend and see adoption and see your level of compliance over time, but you don't want to have risk associated with those audit trails, you could anonymize it, i.e. replace the user ID with a different value, or you may want to delete those audit trails as well. So perhaps once the document has gone to disposition, you may also want to delete that audit trail to give you that extra protection and avoid having to spend a bunch of effort and time digging up those audit trail entries. So some options. There are tools for Microsoft 365. You can go and download them as well and export them and save the Excel documents into a document library. You want to certainly export them on a regular basis before you lose them. We've actually created a product called Gravity Moat that does all this stuff for you. If you want to take a look at that, it would be an option. So some next steps for you as compliance savvy people focusing on the Microsoft stack. Really understand what your needs are, go have a discussion with the business and IT and figure out what your strategy or plan is around this. Make a plan for that, make sure you address any gaps and hurry before it disappears, because there's a lot of good information that may be falling off that audit trail. So you can certainly email me, you can go to our website, we have all kinds of case studies. You can follow us on Twitter, and just for fun, I'm not sure if this will share or not. Can you see my Excel spreadsheet here? Just showing you some of the thumbs up from Kevin.
Yes, I can see that.
Excellent. Yeah, so just some examples of like Here we've got an export of deleted items. You can see who deleted them. Here we have some anonymized entries. Here's a list of IP addresses, and you could reverse enter, go look up that IP address and see where that person's coming from, to see where they've logged in from. We have a big problem up here in Canada with various politicians telling us to go nowhere, and then they fly off to Hawaii for vacation, getting in trouble, so we can see if they're logging in from Hawaii, or even just kind of looking at some activity across all your different various solutions within the platform. So how much are people using SharePoint versus Teams for a given site, for example? So yeah, that's all I had for today, and so we can open it up to questions if anyone has any questions.
All right, very good. Thank you, Michael. That's Michael Schweitzer, CEO and President of Gravity Union, talking about audit trails in 365. Now, Michael, how long does Microsoft 365 normally keep its audit trails, its audit logs?
Yeah. So again, it's dependent on license. So it'll be 90 days. I think it's an E1 or E3 license. It's stored for 90 days. I believe it's a per licensed user. So because sometimes organizations will have a mix of licenses. Some will have some people with E5 and some people with E3. And so if your personal license is an E3 license, it stores your personal audit trail, all of your activities for 90 days with E3 or less. E5 up to a year. And as we saw before, you can configure some rules for retention of the audit trail to a maximum of 10 years, which I believe is an add-on for your E5 license.
Is there a license required for E5 for each user? How does that work?
Yeah, the way that that Microsoft works is basically each user that needs access to Office 365 will have to have that Office 365 user license, and the E3 and E5 are two different types of enterprise licenses. E5 being the bigger, more robust, more capable license that gives you access to more functionality, and by default gives you a slightly longer audit trail. Yeah.
Okay. Are there limits on audit information returned based on access roles? Any limits there?
No. Yeah. So that's a great question. So I think basically if you've been given permissions to jump into the Security and Compliance Center within Office 365, it's kind of an assumption that you have some elevated privileges, and you're going to be able to go and search for anything, any audit activity in the system. Yeah.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I can see a great number of applications for this, even beyond security and compliance. Which workloads do you recommend storing audit logs for?
Yeah, so certainly Teams and SharePoint would be two really important ones. If you dive into the space, it does store across everything. So you can do you have Power BI or reporting activities, so you can know who's actually viewing your reports. It does Azure Active Directory, so you know when people are logging in and where they logged in from, and how many logins do you have per day, and how many failed logins do you have. So there could be intrusion detection type of information there as well. Yeah, all kinds of applications. And so I think the big thing is go understand what you're doing right now, if you have a backup tool or not, and start downloading, and then figure out how you want to use that information going forward, and how long you want to keep that for.
All right, very good. That is Michael Schweitzer from Gravity Union. Thank you, Michael, for being part of our event today.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks a lot.
All right, very good. Well, we are cruising right along here today. Thanks for hanging in there with us. What a great event we have today, and we have more surprises later as well. Right now, I'd like to move to a quick video interview I did recently with Georgina Clelland. Of course, Georgina is the Chief Operating Officer at AIIM, and Georgina visited me just a couple of days ago to provide us some information about the upcoming AIIM 21 conference. A lot of really exciting things are happening. Let's hear Georgina explain some of that to us now. Teresa, can we run that interview now? Georgina Clelland, thank you for speaking with me today. Now, AIIM has brought together information management professionals at its annual conferences for many years. But this year, things are going to be a little different. What makes this year's conference different?
They're going to be very different this year, Kevin. Obviously, we are going to be fully virtual. We prefer to use the term digital. It gives a more encompassing view of what we're going to create as an experience. We have called it a galactic digital experience because the most amazing thing about the time that we're living in is the ability to connect across all around the globe, and information professionals everywhere can join us on our digital experience. That we've always had this in person in fantastic cities in America, and we will be back to doing those experiences one day. For now, we're just taking a little pause, and we're going to say, how do we do something as great as we had in person, but on a digital, virtual experience level?
Well, for those in our audience who haven't been to a conference before, either in person or virtual, tell us a little bit more about what we can expect. What will make this event so special and valuable?
Right, yeah. So we spent since March 5th, about 5 o'clock, as we closed down Dallas, we very much realized where the direction of the events industry was starting to go, that we ourselves experienced it in Dallas. It was very different in March of 2020, hosting an event. And as the weeks went through and we kind of debriefed on what we'd done with Dallas and what we were doing, you could see where this was heading into a virtual world. And as much as so many events did such fantastic jobs of pivoting during sort of Q2 and Q3 of 2020, we made the decision to really go in on what a virtual experience would look like. So we spent hours as an events team and an exec team seeing what other people were doing out there, redesigning, remodeling what our event would look like. We had the opportunity to not pivot, which, I say kudos to every event professional out there who had to pivot in those short spaces of time. But we were designing something completely virtual from the start. This wasn't how do we turn this session style or our trade show into a virtual? This was, how do we get into the minds of our audience and craft experiences that feel as precious as they do in person, but online. So we're creating some different formats. We're very conscious of people's attention spans in a virtual world. I myself sit here, I look like I have an airline cockpit, and I do long to go back on an airplane one day, but I've got multiple screens with multiple things running on them. We've all got multiple devices sitting here at the same time. We've also got, many of us, multiple children in our households and multiple family members in our homes. Distraction is huge, and it's a real deal. So we're crafting, our sessions in the past were much longer. They were kind of a deeper dive. Instead, we're doing 20-minute sessions that we're trying to make as interactive as possible. Me and you sitting here, two people in front of a camera, gives a different dynamic than me presenting a PowerPoint on a screen. That people's cadence in voice and tone and everything like that makes a real difference virtually. So we've crafted some sessions formats that involve multiple speakers sharing some top tips. So you get that feeling of storytelling. You get different voices, you get different perspectives. We're doing some Ask Me Anything sessions that we've been doing on the community site in the last few months, which is, we have some experts, and as it says, you can come and ask them anything you like on that topic that they're talking about. They've been through these experiences, they have subject matter expertise, they're there to answer your question as an audience, so you are participating rather than just attending. We're looking at some dynamic duo sessions where we're looking at we're having two topics or two technical topics, how they complement each other. So one of them that we're looking at crafting would be OCR and RPA. How having both of those together creates ROI for a business, rather than just saying we've got one. It's how do you marry those up together and they become a dynamic duo. Debate sessions, in this world, we love to hear each other's difference of opinions. So what our whole goal is on certainly our session format is to be more dynamic, more fluid, more agile, but trying to get away from as much as possible of the PowerPoint delivery. There's still a place for PowerPoint delivery in some professional skills or project success stories, but how in other ways can we change these up? We're going to do some of the traditional meetups that we would do in person in a room. Obviously, we're all going to be on our cameras in our own homes, but there's no reason why we still can't have that interaction. We will have both a desktop and an app experience. So feel free to be on a session and walking the dog at the same time. You can do walk and talk sessions. So we've really kind of gone in on and been very respectful of how we deliver our education in different ways that keep people engaged and very cognizant of people's time.
Well, and AIIM has been well positioned to do that as a provider of education and value-added content for years and years. This is really not a big leap in a different direction for AIIM. It sounds to me, indeed, like this will give attendees an opportunity to perhaps get more content because they can consume it over the course of the days, as you mentioned, either formally at their place of work or at home or even walking the dog. I think that sounds really great to me.
Yeah.
But it's important that folks register now for AIM 21. And where can they do that? And where can I find more information?
Absolutely. Of course, it's important everybody registers now. We don't want to be sweating ourselves later on, but you can go to aimconference.com, and January is the best time to register. We have early bird value adds that are being added on every month. So if you register in January, you get access to one of our Foundations of Intelligent Information Management modules that are worth $299. You can select which one you want to do, capturing content, digitalizing processes, automating governance. In February, if you sign up in January, you also get February, March, and April value adds as well. So the sooner you sign up, the better your value adds will be. February, we will be offering an enrollment into a pre-event career development workshop, which will be led by Jessie Wilkins, and really looking at how you can create a career plan for yourself in information management. March's value add will be our keynote speaker, digital books, and April will be a AIM conference Zoom background. So the sooner you sign up, you'll start getting all of those added to your registration at the same time.
That is Georgina Clelland. We are talking about AIM 21. Get more information and sign up for your spot today at aimconference.com. That's AIIM conference.com. Georgina, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kevin. This was great. I can talk about this conference for hours on end without any doubt. So thank you.
Thank you, Georgina. All right, that is Georgina Clelland from AIM. Find out more about the upcoming Galactic Experience AIM 21 at aimconference.com. All right, well, let's keep moving on, shall we? Joining us next is John Brown and Dan Tyfor from Helix. John, are you there?
I am here. Hi, Kevin.
All right, John. Very good. Nice to see you. We are joined today by John Brown, CEO of Helix, and Dan Tyfor. I will get that name right. They are here to talk about managing that content chaos with artificial intelligence. John, please tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that where we see a lot of organizations struggle is in the moving data. When do I move data? How do I move data? And what sort of strategies and planning do I need to take on with moving files to M365? And one of the things that that we do is use artificial intelligence and auto classification to do that. So that is what we'll be talking about today. Just get my screen up. Okay. So, and first of all, thanks to Kevin and Teresa and Georgina and Peggy for inviting us to this. This is a great event for us to be involved with, and I hope it's a great learning session for everybody, and certainly look forward to answering any questions that people might have. So we've done an infographic of the digital transformation journey that people embark on, and I think people will be at different points in the process. But hopefully you can identify with some of these. And typically what we see is that people start with the unstructured data, content chaos. So where is all my information? Where does it reside? How do I get it into managed repositories so that people can search and find, the findability aspect, while also respecting the security and permissions. An important part of that is the information architecture, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move along. We have an information architecture tool at Helix called Themis IA for Themis Information Architecture, and we also have a tool which on this infographic is called Genesis AI, which helps for auto classification, but has just been changed, name change. Not soon enough to update it on the infographic, but the new name for Genesis AI is Themis ICE for intelligent content enrichment. Then as people move along the curve, there is auto classification and migration using auto classification techniques. And what we recommend here is to enrich the data on its way to Microsoft 365. And of course, once it lands in Microsoft 365, we have the Teams, SharePoint, and Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntax for auto classification. Those are Microsoft's new tools for the knowledge network and topics and so forth. A very powerful suite of tools from Microsoft that really, it's a game changer. Previously we needed to have massive data sets of information in order to execute on artificial intelligence. With Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntax, we really only need 5 to 8 document types to be able to recognize positives. And then the recommendation is that you also have one negative document so that we can confirm, analyze and confirm that, yes, the system is working. It's correctly identifying the content. And then the last part of the digital transformation journey for organizations is the records management. That's not something we're going to touch on today, but something that we certainly do lots of. And at the end of the day, really the goal for the digital transformation journey is to empower the knowledge workers with all of the information that they need in order to do their jobs, but also meet the organization's risk and compliance requirements for governance. So let's talk a little bit about the content chaos conundrum. The largest collection of unstructured and ungoverned data, as most of you will know, is in your shared drives, email, and now Teams is also joining that party as people who have adopted Teams and rolled it out. You'll know that it can quickly get away from you, and all of a sudden you're a member of more teams than you can manage. People can start teams and add users and so forth. So there's a big governance problem there. And this content, or dark data as we call it, can really represent significant risk to the organization. There's a legal risk. So if you're keeping your tax files, for instance, for longer than 7 years, then IRS in the US or CRA in Canada can do an audit. They can only go back 7 years if you've got a defensible disposition policy. However, if they go in and they see that you've got files going back 15 or 20 years, they can get those files. There's also HR risks and all sorts of other legal risks that you run across if you don't have defensible disposition of your information, and that you're not managing your unstructured content. Compliance risk refers to internal compliance. So you'll have policies in your organization that you'll want to adhere to. And then lastly is the technical debt that you're storing all sorts, particularly as you move to the cloud, you're storing all sorts of information that you don't need. And there's a cost to that. I know that the storage vendors would like us to believe that storage is cheap, but it's not free. So let's talk a little bit about the rot analysis and migration path. Rot is redundant, obsolete, and transitory. So we do see that organizations are trying to wrap their arms around this, transforming their shared drives so that they can get to M365. But first, what we need to do is we need to plan, we need to clean, organize, and manage information that's currently in the network file shares, or indeed even in unmanaged SharePoint, where in the past people may have just en masse moved their file shares to SharePoint and it's still not structured. We need to clean that up. And this transformation is made a lot easier with tools that we provide and services that lots of vendors provide, including us, and with auto classification using artificial intelligence and file analysis. So most people are surprised that really once they do this kind of cleanup, that there's all sorts of files that that don't need to be moved. Stock photos for marketing, copies of files. So if there's been an attachment sent around an email, then to 10 people, then there's 10 copies of that file. And so and CAD drawings and so forth. And what we want to do is exclude those from the migration, or at least plan for whether or not we want to move them. And the takeaway there is that a strong information strategy requires planning and focuses on segregating the different types of content to achieve optimal results, the optimal results being that users are able to easily find information and know that they're looking at the right information. So getting the right information to the right people at the right time. So what do file analysis tools do for you? They analyze the inventory and they look at the metadata and organize the files so that they can be properly migrated. So we look at things like attributes and file type and the size of files, words, phrases, etc. And then this metadata can then be used by M365 for a total lifecycle management of the information, retention labels, content types, security and permissions, who can see what and who can do what to whom, and so forth. So I looked at the original infographic, and we talked a little bit about information architecture. And Naomi Moneypenny at Microsoft has a great quote: "Any investment that you make in information architecture will pay dividends in AI, helping to give it structure, helping to give it seeding, and actually promoting a better experience." So, really look at your information architecture and make sure that it's meeting the needs of the organization, that if you are migrating or moving files, that you've got the right library site structure, library structure, folder structure if required, the right metadata, and the right permissions. So a question that we hear a lot is, should I classify, then move to M365, or move first and classify in M365? There's not an absolute answer to that. M365 does provide classification capabilities, but file analysis tools allow you to manage your files with much less time and effort. It's much easier to plan, do your file analysis, and then move to SharePoint or Teams than it is to move it to M365 and then auto classify, for a variety of reasons. And what we do with our Themis ICE product is that we use the trainable classifiers that exists in Project Cortex to auto-classify the content before migration. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So next steps that I think you need to ask yourself around this whole file analysis and migration and planning for M365. How is your organization doing? So a good analysis of your capabilities and skills and what you want to do. Are you using auto classification? Because that can really help drive down the costs of your implementation and improve your search. Machines are much better than humans at doing this sort of thing. And then have you considered a hybrid approach? So the hybrid approach that, or one approach that we found very successful is that you allow your users to, well, let me back up a little bit there. You move all your files to a read-only, you then have your users move the files over, so you expedite your move to SharePoint and Teams. And then as you're doing that, we can look at the file analysis and so forth and move documents from file shares or Documentum or OpenText or wherever else your content resides that you want to move to. So how do you reach us? Our website is helix.ai. You can email us at info@helixsystems.com. You can certainly email me directly. That's my direct email, my phone number, and we certainly encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And that's it for me.
All right, very good. That is John Brown, CEO of Helix. John, I have some questions for you. Does Helix support multiple languages, and also then content mixing of multiple languages in the same upload?
Yeah, so I have Dan Tyfer on the line with me. He's our product marketing manager. So I will defer to Dan to answer that question.
Yeah, hi there. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Sure
Yep.
can, Dan. Go right ahead.
Yes, could you restate that again? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the question is,
the first part.
Does Helix support multiple languages, and then also content mixing multiple languages in the same upload?
Yeah, so the answer is, with today's technology, because we are also taking advantage of Microsoft Syntax, and Microsoft Syntax is English only, because that is a first release, and we do leverage that from those capabilities from Microsoft, that our first release is really English only. However, that does not preclude us from getting in other languages in the future. And certainly, the world is not English only. We completely understand that. There are certain pieces of metadata that you could sort into language-specific tags in SharePoint. So that's another way of doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're analyzing the content that's in a different language. So that's clearly the second piece. The first piece will support English content, and then in the future, we'll look at some FIGs as some of the other languages that are commonly, mostly the Latin languages. And that'll go in line with Microsoft as well with their support.
All right, very good, Dan, thank you. Now, Dan and John, a question that I hear a lot, does it make sense to move all of my content into Microsoft 365? And when doesn't it make sense?
Well, so we've we heard the expression from Peggy right at the beginning. For those of you that heard that you just don't want to do lift and shift, because that's just moving the problem. So if, for example, you have a corpus of information, let's say in a shared drive or in a legacy system, and if you just dump that into O365 or M365, you really haven't solved any kind of problem. You still have technical debt. And the technical debt is that information relevant? And so I would say that it would really be important to, in order to relieve what you're moving over, to do some sort of analysis beforehand, move the information over, have it classified and automatically extract metadata, and then actually once it's in the system, you can do it again, because there will be some of that information that won't be properly classified, even though you got rid of the raw analysis from the first part, it got through. And so you can do this a second time, and then that is a good way to funnel the information and to get it into the system of record so that you're getting the most bang for your buck, because quite frankly, storage, although cheap, is not free.
Do I still need an information infrastructure architecture when using AI?
You absolutely do, because if you're looking at the two different types of data, you've got kind of archival and legacy data that you can use AI to help you classify and extract the metadata from it and route it appropriately. However, you also have content creators. They're doing steady state. They're in the system every day creating data. And Peggy had also mentioned there's a big gap between deployment and adoption. Well, if you show those end users how using and tagging with metadata can help them find, group, sort, and filter their data, they're going to want to use the system, because they're going to want to they'll be able to find information out more readily. The problem with file shares, for example, you have two pieces of metadata, file name and folder. And people make folders 30 levels deep and you can't find anything. You don't need to do that in an M365 platform, for example, that is metadata rich.
All right, very good. That is Dan Tyfor and John Brown from Helux. Thank you, gentlemen, for being part of our event today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. And
Thank you so much.
It's great. Wonderful event.
All right, with that, let's keep moving on today. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Next up, we are going to be joined by Roland Reddick. Roland, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good.
We are joined by Roland Reddick, pre-sales engineer for Caligo. He is here to speak with us today about leading your organization on its information transformation journey. Roland, so thank you so much for being here. Tell us more.
Great. Thank you very much. And actually, I just want to note that I'm really thrilled by how all the sessions so far, they're very complimentary. So Kevin and crew, really good job. So yeah, I am Roland Reddick, senior sales engineer with Caligo Software. And I'm based in, well, I'm not based in, our company's based in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm based in Toronto, so we're an international organization. And can you see my full screen slide, by the way? Just want to make sure that I'm not showing the wrong view here.
Yes, indeed, Roland, you're looking good.
Okay, good. All right, so my goal for this 10-minute talk is to give you a practical framework to work through and solve the document chaos challenge that has arisen with many organizations, especially with those who rapidly moved to the Microsoft Cloud in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. And of course, one of the big issues is that all these new repositories that we have now, and I'm talking about, OneDrive, SharePoint, and these Microsoft team sites that are just popping up all over the place like mushrooms, they're relatively uncontrolled. And when I say uncontrolled, I mean it's becoming difficult, if not impossible, to be able to search effectively across your organization to locate those business value documents. And I know that the records and compliance managers that are in our virtual room here are nodding with me in, saying, yes, that's exactly what we're experiencing. And so this is an organization-wide problem, and it affects your efficiency, it affects your ability to innovate, your ability to solve problems, and your ability to respond to external pressures like regulatory audits. So this is a growing problem, and it's setting up your workplace for a world of hurt unless we can address it. And it also prevents you from having that ability to mine all that hard work that people have done in your organization, like all their research, their analysis, strategic plans, and so on. And they're all locked away in a haystack of documents that could be stored anywhere. They could be in your mailbox, they could be in a personal OneDrive, or they might be hiding in plain sight in Teams or SharePoint. Okay, so enough said about the problem. I think we get it. Or should I say opportunity, as the optimists prefer to say. And let us definitely recognize that there is a silver lining in every crisis if you're willing to find it. COVID-19 gave us all the opportunity to accelerate our company's digital transformation, and we did it in mere months, not years as we expected. And you didn't just upgrade your company's laptops, your hardware, and your software, but more importantly, you upgraded your liveware. That is your workers. They learn new skills. They learned how to efficiently meet and work remotely. And similarly, haven't we seen in our personal lives, friends, family, congregations, they all adopted these new tools to stay connected in this new environment. Yet, for all these advances, and they've been good advances, the poor state of our document management has prevented us from enjoying that full benefit that was promised by digital transformation. In many cases, we merely met our minimal goal to keep the business going. So what's the solution? The solution to this document chaos is to certainly leverage M365's content management tools to tag those documents that have future business values, and that includes emails. And this identification process also includes migrating these documents into a repository that is appropriately shared and protected. And the companies that diligently extract these diamonds from the morass of dark matter or dark data, as somebody said earlier, they're the companies that are going to succeed. And also they're the companies where you want to work. And think about it this way, your documents didn't write themselves. They are your legacy of contributions to the success of your company. But if nobody can find them and then use them, they basically have no value. So in SharePoint speak, this all boils down to technically to libraries and metadata. Okay, libraries, of course, being the physical file repositories where your documents are stored, where you have like documents with like documents. And then there's metadata, which are the tags that identify and categorize those documents, and they describe what the document is about. And also metadata tags are the keys that make the search and retrieval process effective and quick and efficient. And plus, these metadata keys can also be used for other processes that, for example, you can automate the access and retention using Microsoft labels. So how do we get back on this path and complete our journey of digital transformation? So there's basically two steps that I'm going to walk you through. Step one is that you need to collaboratively plan your information architecture. Now, before you start anything, you got to recognize that this is a high impact, high profile project. It's going to affect the entire organization going forward. And so you need this to be an official company sponsored project. All right. You need a sponsor, you need a budget, you need a scoping document. You need to make it truly official. It's not something you're just going to do, in your off hours. And your plan also must be developed collaboratively. It's not a top-down approach. You do this in partnership with the business. And believe me, without that grassroots input into your plan, you're not going to be able to achieve the adoption that you need to actually experience the benefits of this digital transformation. And so your collaborative planning can be broken down into two distinct phases. So phase one is basically a negotiation. It's an agreement on what your goals are and the benefits. And of course, before you can onboard a team to help solve a particular problem, obviously you need to come to a collective agreement with that team that there is a problem and that the proposed solution is beneficial and valid. And you're going to talk about benefits, and they have to be persuasive and clear. You're going to discuss benefits like optimizing search to save time, how to mine content for reuse, and also the ability to breeze through those external regulatory document requests and audits, and that's another big plus. And then phase two is then you get together and you're going to design that solution. You're going to do it not on paper, but you're going to do it on a spreadsheet. And I recommend a matrix spreadsheet, which I have in a blog that I'll refer you to later. And it's just a matrix with x-axis, y-axis. And ideally, you're going to start with a small single department. You're not trying to tackle the entire organization at this point. Start with a small department with 2 or 3 representatives of that group. And your first task with your group is to identify all the types of documents that particular department is using. And these are going to become your SharePoint content types. And just as a reminder, a content type simply answers the question, what is it? For example, it's a budget, it's a marketing proposal, it's a statement of work, etc. And any document that's going to have future value needs to fall into one of these identifiable content types. And so these content types are going to be the y-axis on your matrix. And then the next step is you determine the minimum metadata columns that you need to distinguish those documents from each other that are of the same content type. And so these metadata columns are the x-axis on your matrix spreadsheet. And some practical tips here as you're going through this with your group. One good thing is to actually look at the current folder structure. See, these folder trees, they really represent the inherent metadata that your users are already using. And if you can replace many of these folders with equivalent metadata columns, that makes a lot of sense to the user and also will end up simplifying the repository and flattening it out. Similarly, look at the file names. You're going to see all sorts of embedded metadata in those file names. Like you might have a date reference or a status indicator like draft, final, approved, and so on. And if you can align your metadata design with how the business is currently filing documents today, you're going to really be a lot closer to adoption than just creating something brand new. And while you're doing this, look for those common metadata columns that can be reused across your multiple content types. Things like statuses and dates are good things that you're gonna use in multiple content types, and that'll save you a lot of effort in the long run. And last tip, if you have a particularly enthusiastic team, really avoid the temptation to go metadata crazy. Now, you always want to brainstorm freely, but in the end, you need to trim off those non-critical metadata suggestions that are just going to, in the end, clutter the screens, slow down the filing, and potentially threaten adoption. So remember, your goal here with metadata is you need to be able to filter those documents down to about one screen of hits with the same metadata. And if you try to be more precise than this, it's probably going to have diminishing returns and just frustrate users on the front end. So once you've got this all done on your Excel spreadsheet, you're going to have to vet your matrix very carefully with the business. Don't rush this, get final sign off, and then you can move on to implementation. Okay, so your next step is implementing your plan. And so congratulations, at this point, you're ready to build your design in SharePoint. And remember, this was your plan, and I'm using your as in plural, group effort, and there should be no surprises for the business. And you're going to be building your plan in the recently updated content type gallery in the SharePoint Admin Center, and also using the term store as well. And you're going to find these updated tools are really great to help centralize your metadata definitions and your terms, and then they can be then used throughout your organization and save you a lot of time. Now, once you've done the coding and you've done all the SharePoint work, then we move now into the change management phase, where we expect the stakeholders to agree to use what they agreed to use. And remember, this was their plan just as much as it was your plan, if you did it right. But please don't let your change management plan follow the movie Field of Dreams. Okay, remember the mantra of that movie was, if you build it, they will come. No, this is not a system that's built on a hope and a dream, but it's built on real life problems, and it was developed with a group-driven design solution. So don't let up on the communication at this point. Engage your PMO. They will need to engage the business with solid training on how to use the system, but they also need to set clear expectations on the old behaviors and the old practices that must stop. Now, also make sure that there is monitoring in place and that everyone is aware of that, and that you're going to be tracking it in order to validate the adoption and also to perform follow-up training as required. Now, don't be surprised if at this point or a few weeks later into the process, you need to do a few more tweaks to the system to address those issues that were not apparent during planning. That's just part of the success, being able to update things to improve the process. Now, with your first success under your belt, you're now going to have several internal champions who are going to help you persuade the next group that you're going to transform. Now, just a quick word about some third-party tools that will help you remove the friction of capturing the content into SharePoint or team sites. Now, we know that email is still the dominant source for company records and also for key knowledge that must be preserved. And some email management tools that will help you bridge that gap between Outlook and SharePoint will certainly simplify that capture process and are going to be invaluable in helping you achieve your goals. Cligo Email Manager for Microsoft 365 is just one example of those tools that streamlines this flow with a straightforward, intuitive UI that's as easy to use as it is to deploy. And fortunately, deploying a modern Office 365 add-in, which is what the Cligo Email Manager is, it's simple and it can actually be completed faster than I talked today. Your business users might even tell you that filing emails into SharePoint is fun. Okay, so I know I spoke quickly, but I wrote slowly in a series of blog articles on the Cligo website titled A Practical Guide for Metadata Implementation in SharePoint. And they're going to be linked in the slide deck that you're going to be provided. And so I thank you for your time. I know it is valuable. And I think we're now ready for some questions.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you so much for that. Yes, we have some questions today. Now, it occurs to me that even the best information governance tools and strategies applied really are suboptimal if users and folks don't adopt them and follow the policies. And we've got a lot of information and folks are used to doing it the way they've always done it. How do you stop users from going back to their old way of storing documents?
Well, most of the legacy repositories that you're using can be made read-only. A typical example is a file share. And I did this with my previous company. We made their, they call it the P drive, public drive, just made it read-only. And after we did all the training, everything, they had to understand the new system first before we, locked them out of their old system. So they still had access to their documents. They could, still get things. They weren't stopped from doing anything, but they were stopped from adding documents to the old system. And so then they were therefore encouraged to put things into the new system, into SharePoint with all the metadata. And that was no problem because they were, right up front, they were explained how it works and what the benefits were. And so we really didn't have any problem with that. And we didn't have to do any kind of rollback.
So it takes some coordination and change management, the tools being locked or not locked or available or not available, but it also takes a great deal or some deal of transitional management in terms of people skills and change management.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a technical thing. You're going to be using all your soft skills. And that's why I encourage you to bring your PMO in, because not every IT manager or IT worker necessarily has all those skills. Some are great. But you want to make this a group effort and bring in the best resources you can in your company. And a lot of those are in your PMO office if you have one.
Now, you talked about metadata. Of course, metadata is so important. How much metadata is enough?
Yeah, so this goes back to a previous point I mentioned about don't go metadata crazy.
Right.
Now, of course, the top level metadata that's essential is content type. All right, you have to start there. And then how much more metadata you provide, this all depends on like how precise you want to be in your searching. In most cases, if you can provide enough metadata to get down to one screen of documents, so in other words, you key in your content type, you put in a couple columns of metadata, you end up with like less than a screenful. That's probably pretty good. That's a good balance because if you put too much metadata in, like maybe put 8-9 columns per document or more, that's going to really slow down the input process. People are going to skip the ones that are optional anyways, and you don't really need to narrow things down to like 1 or 2 documents. A screenful is fine, and so you got to balance the amount of time that's going to take to file things versus the amount of time that's going to take to retrieve things. So keep that in mind, and it's more of an art than a science. It's definitely a mixture of both.
So there can be a time when there is too much metadata.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, you want to have as much metadata as possible, but we live in the real world with realistic timelines, and of course, you want adoption, right? You don't want to take like that 2 minutes that it took to put something into a P drive or dropped into a regular vanilla SharePoint library and make that like a 5-minute process. Maybe 30 seconds if you can, 2 or 3, but that's all going to depend on your use cases, of course.
How do Microsoft retention labels fit into all of this?
Yeah, so Microsoft retention labels, they have a specific purpose, right? They have functionality behind the actual label. And so they're meant to control the life cycle of your document, and they determine how long that document's preserved and also what happens when that time has elapsed. Like, does it automatically delete? Do you send it through a disposition process? So that's a functional type of metadata for a specific purpose. So labels aren't really designed for document search. We recommend you use regular metadata for that, but there is that opportunity to build that link between your metadata and the labels. For example, you could have a particular content type automatically invoke a particular label and have them kind of locked together. So you can search on the content type and search on the metadata, and the labels just kind of come along for the ride. Now, I would definitely say your labels are a separate project. I would take care of the content types and the metadata first, take care of your information architecture first, and then you can circle back and work on labels as a separate project because they have a really specific purpose. If we're talking about not only retention labels, but also the other labels, sensitivity labels as well. That's another important one. So you don't want to mix too much together in a project like this.
Very good. That is Roland Reddick with Coligo. Roland, thank you so much for your input and being a part of our event today.
Okay, thank you.
Well, all right, moving right along, we are closing into our mid-conference break today, but before we do, we have another short movie trailer about AIM 21. Teresa, let's see that now. Very good. AIM 21 coming up in April 27th through 29th. You've got to get your seat now. And if you do, there's a lot of great benefits. And we'll be talking about that here in a moment. But before we do, Teresa, I know you have another poll question for us today. What's up with that?
Well, this is just a really quick poll. Needless to say, we've been talking a lot about conference and all the cool things that Georgina Clelland and our conference team has coming up. I just wanted to give you the opportunity right here, just yes or no, would you like for someone on our conference team to reach out to you to either share more information, help you with registration, answer all of the questions that you have. So just take a few seconds, come in here and ping an answer here. And while we do that, Kevin, looks like that there's just a little bit more that
I do have some more information.
About it. Yeah, go ahead.
I have some more information about AIM 21. Indeed, we have some exciting news. Georgina mentioned some of this earlier, but we have exciting news. Registration is now open for AIM 21, a galactic experience. For years, AIM has been presenting great conferences in person. Now we bring the biggest conference straight to you. AIM 21 is packed full of valuable information on the latest topics, trends, and opportunities for networking with industry leaders and thought leaders and peers, and it has a lot of fun stuff planned, an all-inclusive intergalactic digital platform. As I mentioned, the conference is coming up here on April 27th through the 29th, and for more information, it's easy. Just go to aimconference.com. That's AIM, AIIM, conference.com. Your professional membership allows you to have a discount of $50 off of your registration, and you can find the link to the conference website in the comments section of our event today. So get your seat today, and we'll see you at AIM 21. Now, with that, I would like to turn it back over to Teresa for our mid-conference break today. Teresa, tell us more.
Hi there. This is going to be a really quick break because we're only going to be taking just a few minutes here, and it's more just to give Kevin a quick break. But let me go ahead and share a couple of slides out here while we do this. And again, there's just information here about the conference. I just sitting here at AIM and you're seeing what transpires from our own communication boards. I'm really excited with all the cool stuff that Georgina and her team is working to have for this. So do encourage you to reach out. Since this is approaching our mid-time break time here. Hold on one moment. Let me get to a because it's break time, it is time to thank our sponsors. All of our underwriters, ActiveNav, Caligo, Creo Spark, Valo, Gravity Union, Helix, Microsoft, and Rico. I'm very pleased to have them here. Now, so let me just come back here, and as we move into the rest of the afternoon's activities here, there is, yes, another poll, and this one is back to the Microsoft 365 side of topics that we have here. So let me go ahead and launch this poll out to everyone. Appreciate if you could come up to your keyboards again and answer this question. Which element of Microsoft 365 utilization are you most interested in learning about today? Are you looking to making a better business case, to your executives or other team members, for cloud and collaborative content management? Are you looking to get an understanding of how Microsoft 365 architecture can be the foundation for your ability to automate governance? Reassessing the need for third-party solutions in light of new innovation? Are you learning from past SharePoint sprawl mistakes to contain the M365 content explosion? Or are you looking to learn more about getting users to do what they usually resist, managing their documents in a controlled environment? So let us know where you fall on this. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll here, and I'm going to take a quick look at the results here. And when I look at this here, it seems like it's about neck and neck that you're looking to get your users to do what they resist, for managing their documents in the controlled environment, and also, but just to understand the M365 architecture and how that can be the foundation for automating governance. That is definitely neck and neck for what y'all are looking to get here. So thank you for sharing. This is actually going to help me and more of the content team here at AIIM, just for bringing other activities and other types of learning experiences to you. So always appreciate the feedback that you have in the polls. So just going to again drop just a few more URLs into the chat box for you, and my apologies for those who aren't able to download the PDF of the presentations. That's the one thing I have in a repository that some of you are having problems accessing. Not a problem. I will get that sent out to you in a different way so that you can access the PDF of the presentations. There's been a lot of really good information that's been shared, and certainly the contact information for all of our presenters. So we'll work to get that out to you. But we do have in the resources, that is just a standard web page, and there's a wealth of fantastic resources in there. And so these are things that are not only AIM is talking about. Peggy mentioned at the beginning that we have our very recently published Industry Watch paper. And there's an infographic in there, but there's a lot of really cool resources from all of our speakers and our underwriters that we have included in there. And so we will certainly go to that URL and we will get that out to you. Yes, we are recording this event, and we'll send a follow-up email after the event to give you access to that so that you can come back and also have others share with that as well. And then also we do have that feedback survey. Greatly appreciate if you love hearing from you. I love getting that feedback. I certainly read everything that you submit in there, and we take it to heart. So I'll just be reposting those links in the chat for you when I'm done talking away here. And so we will have that available for you. So I'm just checking to see here, before we come back, I want to do a couple of quick sound checks with the speakers who are coming up in our afternoon session. We still have another couple of hours of really great content lined up here. So let me just go through and do a couple of quick sound checks. Sorry that we have to do this live, but this is what the break time is for. We will be back in officially 5 minutes at the top of the hour. So in these next 5 minutes, let me hit a couple of sound checks here. So let me start. Richard Freeman, can you give me a sound check here?
Hi there, Teresa.
Richard, sounds good. Thank you. And Arslan, are you?
Hi there. I'm here.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you. And Andrew Cohen, just checking your sound as well.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And let me see here. Rob Bogue, are you here with us right now? I know he said he's coming back in time for his session. Not sure if he's here right now. That's quite okay. I see that he's logged in, so I know he'll be here in time for his session. So that's looking pretty good. So folks, thank you for your sound check. You can go ahead and mute yourself again right now. And Kevin, I see you've popped back from the break that you took, so thank you for that. And just
I
want
am
to chat
here.
a little
Hello,
bit
Teresa.
here.
Yes.
Yeah. Like we've covered everything really quickly here. And let's go back to this poll that I had out there. And just wanted to see just what you were seeing in with this. You know, were you feeling that, the same thing with what people were saying about, with what they're here to learn with Microsoft 365?
Well, it's clear that Microsoft 365 and its related components are a bedrock of collaboration and workflow for many organizations. I think this has been a valuable discussion so far. We've talked a lot about governance, which is great and certainly an important side of the topic. I also think there's a lot of opportunity to look beyond simply governance or just governance, to look at how the platform and the possibilities, and I'll speak about this here in a moment in my keynote, how the disruption really is an opportunity when paired with the advancements in the tools that we have available, specifically the 365 suite of products. And so I'm curious, maybe the feedback from our audience, what efforts do they see underway using the environment for things like process improvement and business process and performance optimization, in addition to the regulatory and compliance and safety aspects of what we do?
Good question there. Well, tell you what here. We're getting close to the top of the hour here, and Kevin, just wanted to give you, just let you have the opportunity just to chat for a minute before we go into our afternoon session, because I know you're going to be leading off our afternoon session with your part 2 of our keynotes, because Peggy Winton spoke at the beginning, and you're going to be following up with that. Just wanted to take this one last minute just to see, what were your impressions on what Peggy had shared in her opening keynote?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, in fact, I made some notes. I've been making notes all along the way, and I'll be summarizing some of what I took down here just randomly at the end. But Peggy noted, as we explored in the Information Watch, that there are a number of new challenges associated with where we're at today, with the information chaos becoming an ever-pressing difficulty, and especially in the Microsoft environment. It was, say, 10 years ago, we were concerned about SharePoint sprawl. Well, I believe, and certainly the Information Watch explores the idea of beware of Teams content sprawl and the implications surrounding that. The information created inside and managed and used within the Teams environment is absolutely critical when looked at from an information governance point of view, as well as a process optimization point of view. And Peggy was clear, folks are really using Teams and the environment for very document-centric collaboration, document co-authoring types of functions that absolutely need to be rolled into our governance point of view in our systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for recapping what Peggy had said. And now it's time for you to have your keynote presentation. I'm very pleased to introduce Kevin Crane, AIIM's content strategist, and he is the host of our AIIM on Air podcast. And so, Kevin, please go ahead and share your screen and take things from here.
All right, I will share away. Give me a moment. Thank you. I hope you are all seeing that slide now in my presentation. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Teresa, and thanks everyone for being here today. And it's really a pleasure to be giving the afternoon keynote. Peggy spent a bit of time earlier this morning summarizing her views and some of the feedback in the new Information Watch, Mastering Your Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Investment. I would like to take a moment or two in my time today to go through some of the recommendations that are contained in the Information Watch. It's always good to have some action steps to move forward in addition to our conceptual thoughts and information about where we are today. So with that, I would like to bring us to these 5 recommendations and from the Information Watch. And the number one recommendation is to take advantage of demands for remote working. And I think this is an important topic. Clearly, remote work has come onto the scene in a way that we did not expect. I was not surprised to find in our AIIM research that only 1 in 3 organizations were either prepared or very prepared for remote work prior to COVID. But you know what? There are some advantages or some opportunities afoot with our hasty move towards remote work and teams especially. I believe there's great opportunity in the Microsoft 365 platform to leverage the convergence of disruption that's happening today, in other words, remote work and all of that, with the advancements in technology, specifically Microsoft 365 and others, to establish a competitive advantage in 2021 and beyond. And it's not just me. Now, according to research done by the Boston Consulting Group, some 75% of employees said that during the first few months of the pandemic, they were able to maintain or improve their productivity of their individual tasks because of remote work. Things like analyzing data and writing presentations and executing administrative tasks that run the organization every day. So it is my view that we have a great opportunity ahead of us. Organizations that enable remote work as a strength will have an advantage. And, you know, we talk a lot about technology and the systems that make all this work, and that's great. But remember that for executives and C-suite decision makers, it's not so much about the technology. It is about the implications to organizational performance that really matter. And that is where I believe we have a great opportunity. So take advantage of demands for remote working as a springboard for innovation and improvement. The second recommendation in the Information Watch is to focus on the Microsoft 365 architecture as a foundation for governance. And this makes a ton of sense, and we've been circling that sort of idea here this morning. When it comes to governance, I also like to think of how we govern information, not only from a traditional governance point of view, but how we use that information and leverage it for organizational performance enhancements. Now, part of the research of the new Information Watch indicated that over 50% of organizations that we spoke to say that when support ends for their existing on-premise versions of SharePoint, they will migrate their content over to Microsoft 365. But as Peggy mentioned, the sheer volume and variety of information being created in Microsoft 365, being ported over to it, is a top problem for 42% of the organizations that we spoke to. The feedback is records are everywhere. So it's clear that a lot of content is being used and shared in the environment, and organizations are now considering whether the new Microsoft 365 governance and records and security capabilities, if planned properly, are sufficient to handle at least this part of their information chaos. And certainly Microsoft has made a number of significant investments in governance capabilities that are now a foundation of the platform under intelligent compliance and risk modules and an umbrella. But what can you do today? What can we do now? From the Information Watch, here are some quick recommendations. Protect and govern data wherever it lives. Identify the risks and locate data and have an understanding about how it's used. Identify and take action on critical insider risks. Insider risks are important, and we need to take appropriate action when discovered. Simplify compliance and reduce risk in the environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and investigate and respond with relevant data. There are advanced audit and advanced e-discovery tools that can help us find relevant data and find it cost effectively. So focus on the architecture as a foundation for governance, and we will talk more about that as we go on today. The next recommendation from the Information Watch is to reassess the approach that you use to take on third-party applications. Nearly 63% of the organizations that we spoke to in the new Information Watch research indicated that there will be, or they feel is a continuing role for third-party solutions to maximize the impact of their Microsoft 365 investment. And this is reflected in that 42% that Peggy talked about earlier that find additional governance and records management solutions are very helpful. Their top priorities, the folks that are of that 42%, they're looking at things like integration of back-end processes, something like HR and finance, and integration with other key industry-specific processes. And so, as a platform, Microsoft 365 is this rich ecosystem that includes third-party applications that build upon and leverage the capabilities. So even for organizations that are making M365 their main content solution and seeking to leverage its native capabilities, there are still many great areas in which the requirements are either so complex or are so specialized that augmenting 365 with third-party capabilities in that area makes sense. So what can you do today? Well, let's see if we can get this to move forward. What can you do today? Well, consider these factors when you consider the use of third-party applications. How fast is the Microsoft 365 platform changing in the areas that you care about? Probably very fast. How complicated are your compliance requirements, and how quickly are they changing? How likely is it that the specific capabilities that you are buying from a partner today will soon be incorporated into the core Microsoft 365 platform, and how soon will that happen? And how much easier and quicker is it to buy these capabilities from a partner rather than try to figure out how to build it and do it all yourself? So reassess the approach that you take with respect to third-party applications. All right, and recommendation number 4, I hinted at this earlier here before we started. Be watchful of Teams content sprawl and get ahead of that explosion happening now. As Peggy mentioned, information chaos is a top challenge in Microsoft 365, according to 42% of the organizations we spoke to for the new Information Watch report. Records are everywhere, and the volume and variety are expanding often too quickly to keep up. Not unlike about 10 years ago with SharePoint sprawl, unless we're careful now, the rapid deployment of Teams will create a Teams content sprawl. So it's important to get ahead of that likely explosion now. So what can we do? What can we do today? When it comes to establishing governance around the growing volume of information, we should consider these choices. Should I do governance and records management within 365? Should I move all my content into 365? Or should I consider Microsoft 365 as simply a dedicated collaboration space and move that content into a dedicated repository, a separate one? How do I integrate Microsoft 365 content into core business applications, and how do I make that seamless? And how do we manage legacy-based requirements and cloud capabilities and requirements at the same time? The answers to these questions are individual to each of your organizations and each of our requirements, but they are fundamental choices that need to be considered now. And certainly be watchful. These are strategic questions, but be watchful of Teams content sprawl and what that might mean to you and your organization. And finally, number 5, use the popularity of Teams and the popularity of remote work to get users to manage their documents in a more in a way that they haven't been necessarily maybe willing or able to do before in a controlled environment. The number of Teams users are exploding. It's ubiquitous in nearly all enterprise organizations. 91% of the Fortune 100 companies in America use Microsoft 365 and Teams. According to our research, the folks that are using Teams that we spoke to, the most important collaboration priorities are storing and accessing shared files, 54%. That surprised me, considering that video meetings and collaboration I thought would be at the top. That was only 42%. 40% say that they are using Microsoft 365 and Teams specifically to work together to create a finalized document. These could be the very documents that make our organizations run. Proposals, tenders, it could be compliance documentation. All of those that really make our organizations run every day are being managed and used and working within the environment. So the core opportunity that I feel we have afoot today is best understood by thinking about what it would mean if convening video meetings and with our coworkers and partners could be used to share files and work together to create finalized documents. And how do we do that? And what does that mean with information governance? When you work in Microsoft Teams and store a document, it does so in either SharePoint or OneDrive, which means that without even realizing it, users could find themselves working in a managed content environment rather than file shares and random other platforms. So if governance is set up right, the content can be managed without any of the users even knowing they're doing governance. So use the popularity of Teams to get users to manage their documents in a controlled environment. All right, what can we do now? Of course, get your copy of the new AIIM Industry Watch Report, Mastering Your Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Investment. Peggy and I have both talked about it today. It's full of great information, research, and feedback. And you just got to get it. So please do. You can find the link in the chat and resources section here, or simply go to AIIM.org and find it there. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me speak today. If you'd like to find me, well, you know where you can find me, at the AIIM On Air podcast. Did you know that AIIM has a podcast? Twice a month, I interview experts, knowledge leaders, executives, technologists, futurists, all kinds of people about these topics and others. AIIM On Air, it's easy to find. Just go to wherever you find your podcast today. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, or it's easy enough to find us at aim.org/podcast. So with that, thank you so much for listening to me today. I will stop sharing my screen so that we can now move along to some of our other presentations today. But Teresa, before we do, I understand that we have yet another video to share with our audience about AIIM 21.
Yeah, my conference team has just done a fantastic job with pulling all of this stuff together. So yep, let me show you another quick video. I love that video.
That's fantastic, Teresa.
AIMconference.com. Please check it out.
All right, very good. Okay, well, with all of that, let's move on to our afternoon set of speakers today. We will be joined by Richard Freeman from Ricoh, Canada, and Arslan Izadirad. Arslan Izadirad will be here. Richard, Arslan, are you with us?
We're here, Kevin. Thank you very much.
All right. We are joined by Richard Freeman, Principal Consultant of Ricoh, Canada, and Arslan Izadirad from Ricoh, Canada. Gentlemen, welcome to the event today, and please tell us more.
Certainly. I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
You are looking good, Richard. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, and I'm really pleased to be here today. having participated within the context of the work that was done, it's really fun to be able to talk about some of the observations we made. And I'm joined today with Arslan, a national sales manager here with Rico as well. And Arslan will be available for questions as we move through. We've had enough of this, I know, but we really have changed, and we've changed the way we work, we've changed the way we communicate, and we've even changed the way we play, possibly forever. And it's in that, when faced with the pandemic, we had to react very quickly. And the problems we would face post March 11, in our case, that's when I got the phone call to return home. We didn't really know what was going to happen. Some of us thought this was a couple of weeks thing. Some of us thought it might be a few months, and here we are in month 11. But through April and May, IT teams worked feverishly with vendor partners to deal with requests from employees and customers to maintain the services and deliver goods. And prior to March 11th, organizations were certainly trying to make sure that they delivered their goods and services while improving operational efficiencies, while taking costs out and improving productivity, and of course, to remain relevant and competitive in an ever-changing world. But then with the pandemic, a major pivot had to happen. We went from all of that to conserve cash and keep the lights on. And there were a number of things that came up. I look at it in kind of these 5-bucket approach where, the first thing was we had VPNs that were congested. In the case of the federal government, for example, they went within a 2-week period from probably a 30-to-1 contention ratio on VPNs to a 1-to-1. And that meant over 200,000 people were all of a sudden scrambling to get connected. And, everybody was focused on that. All the IT teams across the world were focused on getting those VPNs up to snuff and making sure that people had access. But there were also other things that came about through that. And one of the big ones was the fact that email became the major way of communicating while things were trying to be fixed. And email became somewhat of a security problem because people were using their personal email addresses to send documents. I witnessed things myself where people were sending documents that might contain proprietary or confidential information through their personal email accounts just so that they could get their work done. Collaboration and communication tools were quickly rolled out, but we started having problems at first. With Zoom and with Skype, we had security issues and performance issues, and a lot of organizations were right in the middle of that transition from Skype to Teams, which also caused some burden. Another factor were legacy IT systems. These systems were never really built to manage remote access. They were built for on-prem kind of solutions. And so governments and others were rapidly trying to get these systems up and running properly. We saw big recruitment going on for COBOL programmers so that payments could get out, etc. And then one thing that nobody really thought about were home-based printers. The people that were sending the emails sometimes didn't even have home-based printers along with not the sufficient internet connection. So, you would maybe somebody would send an email to their spouse. And I witnessed that in my own family where, they were sending it between each other because the husband had a printer. And then the person would look at them and said, you erased that, right? After it was printed. And so there were a lot of issues that we ran across, and IT teams had to rapidly look at that. Some of these are still lingering, but for the most part, most organizations have done a pretty good job of keeping the lights on and getting things going. Now, compounding those infrastructure issues were the things that we just face in many organizations from a work process, right? There still remains a significant amount of reliance on paper. Yes, we're in 2021 and paper is still everywhere. Media conversion and digital fragility have become more evident. Local government and older organizations still have microfiche, film, tape, and disk resources that continue to be relied upon. And how are those to be accessed remotely? Dated systems, software and infrastructure, all of that. And the talent and skills. The pool is shallow. And when I say that, it's not when it comes to institutional knowledge, but how to use that knowledge to execute properly. And transitioning to new ways of communication is also another big piece of that. How do we do that? Now, just to give you an idea and put this into perspective, when I talk about transition and the speed of transition, the telephone reached 80% adoption in 60 years. Color TV, 90% in 26 years. Smartphones reached 80% adoption in 8 years. Work from home, 2 weeks. So that's a huge major transition that we faced very, very quickly. And work from home brought a number of challenges. The organizations, for a large part, especially larger enterprise organizations, didn't really have suitable devices that they could deploy rapidly. So people relied on personal devices or other means until those laptops and tablets could be deployed. A lot of home networks did not have the sufficient bandwidth, let alone the fact that a lot of people that ended up working from home decided, well, hey, why don't I work from the cottage? And cottage country really didn't have the bandwidth capable of supporting things like we're doing today. The security challenges ran amok, right? We got the systems deployed, we got to keep the organization up and running, and we sacrificed possibly some of those security things. And then finally was the culture and training. No one had really worked with this en masse, as I like to say, with a lot of people going in through video and trying to understand how to use this properly. What was the decorum? What protocols should we do? And what training did we have? Well, if we were deployed in 2 weeks, probably not a lot. As my friend Angie Tinto once said on a recent LinkedIn post, it's kind of like a mullet, right? Working from home. Business on the top and party on the bottom. So in overcoming these challenges, organizations are looking at the same things we looked at pre the pandemic, but to a different extent. How do we scale? How do we scale the business? Because we've got to rein this back in now. We've got these things deployed. We've got people working, some still on some ad hoc ways. There's been a lot of talk about governance and such, of course, because now information is probably in multiple places and we may not know where everything is. And we need to be able to scale our business properly. And we need to do that cost effectively. We need to make sure that whatever we're doing is actually serving the business and not just appeasing the business. We need to make sure that it's agile, that we incorporate analytics so that we can see what's going on, what happened, what's going on, and what will happen. Repeatable task automation, we can now automate more with things like RPA and different functions that we have now available to us in our toolkit, but we need to focus on what that repeatable task will be. And then always provide a path for future thinking. When I talk about analytics, it's really about the 4 V's, right? The volume, the veracity, and the variety and velocity of that information. So the volume, the main characteristic is really the big data, the amount of sheer volume. How much volume do we have now separated between our SharePoint sites, our Exchange sites, and whatever tools we're using, such as OneDrive. And the variety of information, as more and more information is digitized. And the veracity, how do we make sure that the information we are using is actually trustworthy and is real? And the velocity, of course, is the frequency of incoming data that needs to be processed. And with this remote working, we're getting more and more data that needs to be processed and reined in. We like to look at it in terms of how do we approach this? We like to look at it in the terms of design thinking. In other words, what is it that is our goal that we're trying to achieve? What is our true north? So for anything we're trying to do, such as an M365 rollout, it's what is it that we're trying to accomplish with this rollout? Obviously, there is the broader purpose of just being able to share documents and collaborate, but within the context of that function, what is it that we want to achieve? What is the outcome we want to achieve? And we achieve that obviously through empathy, being able to talk it through and consider it. And we could look at all the steps of that from the idea to implementation as a linear path, but it really isn't. We need to consistently learn about outcomes through that empathy and empathize to help define the problem and prototype some things. Let's trial some stuff and ideate and see how that's going to come about and make sure that we test it properly. And then finally, make sure that we institute the KPIs or the key performance indicators that will allow us to provide better user refinement and efficacy within the process. So the way forward from our perspective is really understand that true north. understand that we got to start by talking to your people. We believe that we should start with a visioning and planning workshop to set the course for projects. Use IG as a foundation for change. Now that we can start to understand where we want to go to and we can corral people into a workshop, let's make sure they're aware of what the information governance issues are and use that as a foundation for change. Use analytics to align the work with our goals. And then with these tools, experiment and use simulation to test processes. So that's really the piece that I wanted to share with you, because I found that with this rollout right now and what's going on with most companies is we need to sort of take a step back, take a look at where we are and define where we want to be as we go forward. And I think that's probably the most important thing we could do to realize and maximize the benefit of our 365 and SharePoint rollouts.
Very good, Richard. Thank you so much for that. Design thinking. Yeah, I think that was an important model there. I really found valuable. Now, hackers really wasted no time in using the fact that people are working from home, often on less secure networks, to craft ways to try to hack and steal data as a result of that. Can you elaborate a bit more on Microsoft security and how it relates to phishing and ransomware?
I'll let Arsalan address that first.
Sure, sounds good. That's a great question, and the analogy I always like to use is, think about M365 and the security that Microsoft builds around it, like basically like living in a gated community housing environment. There's a lot of protection around it, but there's still not enough protection to prevent someone from walking into your door. So that's why, when we work with our clients and we look at implementing M365 for our customers, we always, recommend taking advantage of some additional security offerings that can be wrapped around the M365 environment to provide that added layer of security.
Now, you mentioned analytics. How can analytics be used in this model that you described to prototype a design that will be more effective in solving the challenges that we have?
Thank you, Kevin. I think analytics are really important and become way more important now than ever before, because we need to understand where we are, what's going on, and where we need to go in the future. And the beauty of collecting that data and being able to analyze it and using data science techniques allows us to have predictive analytics, to be able to look forward, to forecast where we might want to go or where we might want to be and what has happened along the way. And I think if there's one project that most organizations have to look at seriously right now, it is the analytics.
Now, Richard, you talked a lot about how we got here. I love the historical perspective. Looking forward 2021 and beyond, what type of technology solutions do you expect to be in high demand in the next coming months?
Well, we're definitely moving to more and more automation and relieving those mundane, repeatable tasks. And there are significant and numerous RPA tools, robotic process automation tools out there that can help, but also some workflow tools within existing software that organizations may have that we should be looking into to take better advantage of as we do that. And as I said at the end there, being able to simulate and experiment is really, really important. So if we can take the analytics to understand where things are going and what we're doing, and then say, well, if we use this tool, what would that benefit be, and measure those KPIs and measure that out through. But the most important thing is to understand what is it we're really trying to achieve. Technology is a tool. It's not going to solve anything. It's going to allow you to get to where you want to get to, but it is not the answer. It is a tool.
Very good. That is Richard Freeman, Principal Consultant at Ricoh Canada, joined by Arsalan Izadirad from Ricoh Canada. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today on our AIIM virtual event.
Thank you, Kevin.
Our pleasure.
All right, well, very good. Thank you. Moving right along, our next presenter today is Andrew Cowan from ActiveNab. Andrew, are you there?
I am indeed. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We are joined by Andrew Cowan, product owner at ActiveNab. Andrew, thank you so much for being part of our event today. Tell us more.
Right, thank you very much, Kevin. There we go with the obligatory front slide, which has my name and my title, product owner at ActiveNav. The product I'm the product owner for is Discovery Center, so you may hear me talk about that as well. And I'll just, there we go. I know how to use this stuff. I'm an IT professional. That's a very big picture of me. I'll flip past that really quickly. So we've been talking a lot about this process stuff, and I found it really intriguing. I felt very seen by a lot of the stuff that was just presented by Richard with the transition to this brand new world of COVID. I think he was probably scoping out my house while we were trying to figure out how to do working from home and schooling from home and all that kind of stuff. Very, very familiar feeling stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of getting kind of pushed or pulled into this online services and remote work and all that kind of stuff, and how that can be a very quick thing that happens, right? You got to get up to speed. Working from home adoption rates of 2 weeks, that's very, very quick. If you want to keep your business going, you have to focus on getting that part done. But now that you might have a chance to sort of look back and see where you are after you've done that uplift to present it to running in this new world, what kind of shortcuts might have been taken, and how do we go back and look about how should we maybe take a little bit of process on that designing the system so that you can do it in a repeatable and in a fashion that is helpful for the business, not just get it up and running, but something that can maybe provide some value while you're going through this kind of a migration from on-premise to sort of in the cloud kind of world. It's a great opportunity when you're going through that migration process to bring some rigor into that process. The chance to identify the content that you have, to reorganize the storage so that the right content is in the right place with the other content that it belongs with, to take advantage of some of those built-in capabilities that Microsoft brings with M365. So all of that platform knowledge that they have, the different features and capabilities that come with Microsoft 365, and how are those going to fit in with your structures and your processes and the kind of information that you have. There can be a really strong desire to just get it done, to lift and shift that content from on-premise into the cloud, but it's a good chance for an organization to find that content, do the nice tidy up kinds of things with that content before you hand that back to the business in the M365 world in a well ordered and ready to use fashion. So you have these sort of things that you can think about while you're going through that process that are not just getting the content into the cloud, but also taking some of that opportunity to massage the data, to reorganize the data, to understand what that data is, and then take advantage of that new environment of M365. The tools that ActiveNav provides, Discovery Center is the one that we're sort of talking about here, is a tool that provides a file analysis, and it's kind of a boring kind of thing. We're not very exciting. It's kind of a sit back in the background kind of a tool, but it does give you a chance to understand the content that you have, running initial scans just to identify how much data you have. There's lots of organizations that we talk to have no idea how much data they have, about what that data is, what repositories it's being stored in, and just knowing that can help an organization better plan the migration from an on-premise to an M365 environment, looking for duplicate documents, looking for non-business files, understanding which of those documents might have sensitive information, to understand what parts of that content can be migrated, about which parts you can just just completely delete it. It's that lovely rot stuff, the redundant information, the trivial information that the obsolete information that you don't need anymore. You can just remove that from your migration process to reduce that data footprint that you have when you're going through migration. Using, using patterns and keywords and themes, understanding the content that is in each of those documents to be able to identify that information, to help organize it and prioritize which parts of that data repository, those repositories, needs to be moved when and how, and who owns that information, and just where that information can go. It gives the opportunity for an organization to plan that process, to be able to understand which are the priority pieces, which parts have to happen first, where that information is going, giving you a nice set of clean data that you can push into the cloud, and your organization can be effective with that information from the start as soon as it gets into the cloud, having done a little bit of that work on that cleanup. And I wanted to touch on just one of the features of M365, which I caught a little bit of at the end of the previous session, to the afternoon sessions, where there was a bit of a talk about security labels. And this is one of those things that is kind of a bit of a challenge for organizations who aren't already in the M365 world, but it's certainly a fundamental structure inside of the M365 information protection and information governance features that Microsoft has provided. If you're not quite familiar with what those things are, MIP security labels are embedded metadata into documents, Office documents and PDFs. And those embedded metadata tags give you two really important capabilities. The first one is indicating to the end user what the classification of a particular document is. You can see in the screenshot there where it's showing the document as being restricted external. It could also put headers and footers on documents, that kind of stuff. But that gives the consumer of that document, the reader, the author, the understanding of the value that that document has to your organization, that they can treat it with the respect that it deserves, give it the duty of care that's required for that document. The other piece that MIP security labels brings is that embedded metadata, and that's really important because Microsoft has extended many of their security and control products within Microsoft 365 to understand those labels and be able to take automated action based on that label. So, for example, automatically encrypting documents that are super duper top secret for the security, for the senior management team, or to block company confidential documents from being shared outside the company. So that sort of automated capability based on that label within the document helps to give you some of that governance and some of that security capabilities that are already built into M365 across the board with many of the capabilities that they have in there. And for us inside of Discovery Center, that becomes part of the migration process. As an example, we go through the process of tidying up your content, of identifying the information, about assigning particular metadata information within Discovery Center about what a particular document might mean for the company, the value that it has, which part of the organization owns that content, whether it contains sensitive information, that sort of the PII and all those fun sorts of things. And then once that process is done, and during the migration process, taking that content from the on-premise repositories and pushing that up into M365, you can then automatically apply those MIP security labels to that content so that when it lands inside of M365, all of those security features that already exist within M365 can be taken advantage of from day one. You can automatically implement those capabilities without having to do any additional work from the end user side or any of the sort of scanning and content sort of tools that are inside of M365. You've done the cleanup, you've done the understanding of what the content is, and then done the migration piece to include that metadata to take advantage of it on day one. And then following that, of course, you're never done. You use those same capabilities of understanding the content to drive the governance of that information. So all of that work that you do up front when you're modeling that data, understanding where the value of that information is for the business, can also then be carried over into the modeling within M365 and the governance and security measures that are are available there as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I know I didn't have a lot of time, and I just wanted to leave a little bit of time to let some folks ask some questions if they had any.
All right, well, thank you. That is Andrew Cowan with ActiveNav. Now, Andrew, as you were talking, I was making some notes. It occurs to me that you're talking about leveraging the migration process and using that as an opportunity to leverage the capabilities. It is sort of a lift and shift, but I don't know, in my view, it is not a pain, it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's not exciting, but indeed, maybe I'm a geek, but to me, I don't see how it could be more exciting to understand what I've got, what it means, where it lives, what I'm going to do with it. Am I moving it over? Am I not moving it over? What does it mean in terms of all of the metrics that drive my business, whether that's on a compliance side, a security side, or a performance side? Can you give us an example of one organization or one application that did such a thing, and what were the results? What did it mean for them?
Yeah, so we have one of our customers was going through this sort of a process, and they managed to reduce the data footprint that they had by 40%, which stunning to me that they were able to do that just by analyzing the content, getting rid of the duplicate. I think they had a duplicate percentage of something like 12%, which is unfathomable to me. I don't understand how that kind of thing. Well, actually, I absolutely do understand how that can happen. End users copy lots of things that they don't need to. 12% was about duplicate content. There was a big chunk of that 40% was also information that they didn't need to keep anymore. So it was that risky information that shouldn't be part of the organization. And then also being able to remove the trivial stuff. So people have all kinds of personal information that are stored in those places that you don't have visibility on. This migration process, this project that you have is a good time to do that so that you can start off with the right information in the right place and accessibility to the right people inside of your new shiny M365 space. In my head, I think of it a lot like when I moved house, right? If there's a box that I can get rid of and not have to put it on the truck, it's not coming with me, right? Like that's a really good opportunity to tidy up and make sure you have the right information in the right place in your new house.
Now, Andrew, Helix mentioned they have a file analysis and a ROT app. I'm wondering if ActiveNav's tool is another file analysis ROT app. How does it work? Would they both accomplish the same thing? What are the differences? What are the commonalities there?
Yeah, so our tool is very much based on being able to look at content across the board with different levels of different levels of scanning. So there's sort of initial scans to just say, well, how much information is there? What does my structure look like? Maybe who owns the information? And then maybe digging a little bit deeper after you have a good understanding of what's out there, and then focusing on different areas. You can't eat the elephant all at once. At least most organizations can't. So it tends to be the kind of thing where you want to do the very initial understanding so you can plan the next steps as you go, and then digging a little bit deeper into that content, looking for those duplicates, looking for that rot, the stuff that's 15 years old that that you can't keep anymore, looking for that content inside with specific extraction rules that look at finding the PII, the project-based information, the business-specific information, so that you can identify what that information is, who it belongs to, and where it goes, and be able to report that back to the organization and say, here's what our problem is. How are we going to tackle it? Are we going to delete this stuff? Are we going to migrate it to a new system? We're going to quarantine it? Are we going to go through some workflow process where we take advantage of looking at each of those sets of documents and put some business eyes on it, rather than the content the content custodian who probably doesn't understand what the content means, and bringing that back to the business so that they can make the decisions that are important about that content. That's kind of where we sit for Discovery Center.
I am amazed that your use case analysis, at least in that one case, found 40%
right
of data that was retained was redundant or useless. 12% of it was duplicate.
Yeah.
All right. So if I go through this work, I reduce that rot. I get my house in order. Moving forward, then how do I prevent more of that happening in the future so that in 10 more years from now, I'll have the same kind of problem?
Yeah, it is about having that governance in process, right? That governance process in place. So it's not just the the regulatory stuff or the legislative stuff that you have in place, but it's also about keeping your own house in order, making sure that you don't get into those positions where you're starting to balloon wasted space or wasted overhead on this. 40% was amazing. I can't believe that they had that much, but it could be 40%. Keeping a lid on that with an ongoing process of looking at that content. So it's not just a do it once and you're done. The way I presented it here was do it once and then migrate. After you've migrated, you need to continue that process where you're going back and looking it through all those repositories, checking that content, ensuring that it's still meeting those criteria that you have for why are you keeping that content. Is it in the right place? How long are you going to keep it for? Does it meet up with your retention policies? Can I get rid of it?
All right, that is Andrew Cowan, product owner at ActiveNab. Andrew, thank you so much for your comments and being a part of our event today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, very good. Well, let's keep on moving on. Next, I'm pleased to bring to us an interview I did not long ago with Scott Miller. Scott is the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership at Franklin Covey. And the author of the new book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. It is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And in this interview, I talked with Scott about managing change and the specific techniques for mid-level leaders and all of us really to better implement technology and process change. So, Teresa, can we run that interview with Scott Miller, please?
Now, I interview a lot of folks, both in management and frontline workers, and effectively managing change is consistently a top challenge for everyone. What's your advice for leading teams through these times of constant disruption and change?
Well, you just said it, right? I mean, this is cliche-ish, but change is the new normal. It's our new reality that, again, leaders have got to take the time to invest in their teams. There's a style of leader that thinks he or she's doing the right thing by protecting their team or their division from organizational change. And that's, although well-intended, it's actually a horrible thing to do, because when it does come time that your team has to change, they've not developed that nimbleness gene or that flexible mindset where they're able to adapt to it. So what might be a good thing in the short term is, I think, a bad thing in the long term. So the first thing I would say is leaders who lead great teams that are great managers, they talk straight. They tell the truth. They show their cards. They declare their intent. They talk about changes coming, and here's how we need to deal with it. Secondly, they take time to validate people's fears and concerns, right? Again, you've probably, as a leader or a manager, been involved in some of the conversation, maybe not all of it, but you've got more context than often your team has. So take the time to explain to them what you can. Absent facts, people make stuff up. So as a leader, be as transparent as you can. Obviously, depending upon your level and the nature of your company, there's some things you may not be able to disclose. But say to people, I may not be able to disclose everything, but here's what I do know that I can share with you. You can ask me any question. Nothing's off limits, and I'll answer it if I can, and I'll keep you updated. People can deal with the truth. They can't deal with ambiguity or a vacuum of information. And then finally, I would say, as a leader, I think it's really important that you compartmentalize your own opinion about the change. If you're a mid-level frontline leader, if you're a unit leader level, you probably did not cook up the idea of change, right? It probably was handed to you. And therefore, you probably have your own opinions about it. I mean, if you're all like me, I love change when it's my idea. But when it's somebody else's idea, it's a whole different story, right? I'll do my best to bring it to a halt or whatever. So
right.
As a leader, you've got to compartmentalize your own opinions about it. Set those aside. Your job is to implement the change, what you're paid to do. And then maybe later come back and maybe talk with your leader about your own fears about it. So validate your own feelings, perhaps set them aside, bring them back, discuss them later, but also take the time for your team to share with you some of their concerns and their fears. Some people will come along faster than others, and at some point, they either have to get on or get out. But don't try to artificially rush people's concerns and questions. The more they understand, the more they see the why behind the what, the better you all will be in place to move and thrive through the change.
The book is Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team, a Wall Street Journal bestseller. Everyone Deserves a Great Manager outlines 6 of the most critical practices for leading a team. And the first one is the ability to set up your team to get real results. And that's both a science and an art, and a delicate mix, it seems to me, of leadership and delegation. Can you give us some examples of a great manager that has that successful balance between leadership and letting go?
I think that's a person that really takes the time and invests the effort to explain the why behind the what. The why behind the what. I think a lot of leaders spend a lot of time thinking about strategy in their head and meeting with perhaps their top team leaders on new acquisitions or new deployments or new products. And we don't spend nearly enough time explaining our thoughts behind it. Secondly, I think is this idea of delegation. Great leaders who develop great teams, very carefully calibrate what do they delegate, what do they hold back.
That's Scott Miller. The book is Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. Scott, thank you so much for being our guest today on Everyday MBA.
My pleasure. Thank you for the platform.
All right, that is an interview with Scott Miller from Franklin Covey. Scott is an author of many best-selling books. This new one just came out, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. And hey, that was a podcast interview. Did you know that AIM has a podcast every month? We come out with interviews with thought leaders, authors, executives, covering a variety of topics. This interview with Scott Miller is on our docket coming up soon. Find AIM on air everywhere you find podcasts today, or simply go to aim.org/podcast. All right, next up, we have Robert Bogue joining us. Rob, are you there with us? Hello, Rob.
I am here.
I can hear you, Rob. Cannot see you.
Well, we can fix that. There we go.
All right, very good. Hello, Rob. Thank you so much. We have a video from Rob, but then Rob will be joining us for some Q&A afterwards. Rob is the president of Thor Projects, and he is talking to us about Microsoft Teams, what we did before and what we're doing now. Teresa, can we run that video?
Hi, I'm Rob Bogue, and what I want to do is talk to you about what we did. Like, what did we actually do when we had this thing called COVID? What did 2020 mean? And then, what do we do now? The things we did for a reason. The why of this is really important. We wanted to protect our employees. We wanted to prevent them from getting ill or any of their family members getting ill. So what did we do? We sent them home. The problem with this is that most organizations weren't set up for everyone in the organization to work from home. We had a whole bunch of processes that, well, they just didn't work anymore because no one was there. So we had to figure out, how do we protect the organization? How do we get the organization to be sustainable when nobody's here? Well, what the change was we implemented Teams, really. I mean, if you look at the difference in the amount of Teams usage, you see that we dramatically changed the amount of Teams that we were using. We suddenly needed it to communicate. We couldn't walk over to Jim's desk or walk by Susie and ask her how her day was or how things were with that new project. We needed a way to communicate, and Teams provided that. But that's the rapid adoption aspect. How do we get to sensible maturity? If we think about Teams with 3 core offerings, right? How do we get to adoption with Teams? Well, one piece of it is meetings. Well, COVID solved that problem for us. It helped us to engage in a lot more virtual meetings than we had ever done before, and probably more than we wanted to. It also helped push us towards chat. So while we used chat before in a lot of cases, we started using it more aggressively as we couldn't lean over the cubicle and ask. The one interesting aspect, the one part of our team's adoption story that, well, honestly didn't get the right kind of attention probably is collaboration. It's been a difficult thing for all of us for a long time. The truth is that when we deployed teams, we really deployed telepresence. For the most part, we just allowed people to pretend like they were in the same place when they weren't. In fact, things like together mode are a really good example of this. We tried to make it feel like we're really there. And whether that's one chairs in an auditorium or the Hollywood Squares version, it doesn't matter. We were trying to help reconnect without that pesky virus problem of literally being in the same place. However, we discovered that the files that we wanted to use, that we needed to use, were still sitting on file servers. For the most part, they were in some sort of a file repository that didn't lend itself to being accessible from the outside world. And that created the VPN problem. You see, the VPN problem is our VPNs were scaled not for everyone working from home, but from a percentage of our folks working from home. When we went to everybody instantly working from home, well, the VPN systems got very, very busy. And we recognized that we needed more horsepower and we needed more connectivity. And for the most part, we did that fairly quickly. The problems with end users, with our employees getting their bandwidth, eventually caught up. But through all of this, we recognized that part of the problem was we were centralizing our files into our corporate networks, and we needed to do something different. And so while teams may have led adoption, we became more and more aware of the content problem. And the content problem itself is really two pieces. There's the collaborative content services. This is the stuff that we work on, the proposals and the presentations, all the stuff that we work on in and out, but doesn't fall into a traditional transactional process. This stuff really super easy. People started to use the Files tab in Teams because it was easier for them to access, and it was backed by SharePoint with versions, all the magical stuff that we've come to expect. You see, that actually wasn't that difficult to get there. Now, it's still an unorganized mess because nobody knew what they were doing, but at least it made it into Teams. But then you have the transactional content services. This is the stuff that is a part of our business process, the documents that get created, and they land in some hysterical archive document management system that really just doesn't work outside the walls, or at least it doesn't work well, and we're back to our VPN problem. So now in some of these cases, we actually saw companies and customers, they were picking up some of the stuff that they would normally do with paper, and they dumped it into a library in SharePoint or via Teams, and then they were parsing it out, and they were trying to do this kind of hybrid, this is the way I would do it on paper, but I'm going to do it half in electronic and SharePoint and Teams and try and make it, and they had to do that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have done that. We had to do that. We had to do something to protect both the individual and the organization, but it sort of left us with a mess, right? Because now we have content that's potentially in multiple places. Some of it's on the file share, some of it's up in Teams, some of it is a copy of the paper that got scanned that we normally would have thrown away, but it's a file, and so now we don't know if we should throw it away. So my question is, who's emptying your trash now? Who's going around in your home office and emptying your trash? Hopefully you are, particularly if you eat at your desk, right? But how do we make sure that we're getting rid of content in the right way? And this moves us to the sensible maturity. And I think there are 4 things that we can do. And so the first is, I would encourage you to implement sensitivity labels. The second is retention labels. The third is digital loss protection. And the fourth is to implement some group naming restrictions. Let me give you a little more detail on each of these. So when we're talking about implementing sensitivity labels, what we're really talking about is the application of information rights management. Now, it's been around for decades, but most people have never really had any time to understand what information rights management is. It's a container for controlling access. And one of the ways it does that is through encryption. And that could include encryption in transit. So it could encrypt your emails as they're being transmitted from you to the target person. It also allows you to manage a sort of second level of permissions. You can control who has the keys to open the encrypted lockbox that is controlling and containing the document. Next, you can control the timing. You can say they can only see this for the next 2 weeks or the next 2 minutes, whatever it is. You're allowed to control the way that they can use that content in ways that we've never been able to do that before. Additionally, when you implement sensitivity labels, you can automatically watermark content. Second, implement retention labels. Right? This is all about destroying content. This is all about emptying the trash bin. And you can do this either because the business use for it has ended, i.e. it's already in the transactional system, it's time for it to go away out of Microsoft 365, or after the legal requirements have ended. Microsoft 365 is the end repository and we need to protect it until the legal requirement to hold it has run out. You could also trigger a disposition review. Basically, instead of throwing it directly into the trash, you can say, no, I want somebody to look at it before they throw it in the trash. This can be based on either metadata from the content itself, any date that's in there and some time period after that, or it can be based on an event. The final thing that you can do with a retention label that's super powerful is the ability to declare or classify the content as a record. Classifying the content as a record means that it will be protected against modification and accidental deletion. Third, implement digital loss protection. Now, you see, I actually think this is a really bad name. I think that as an industry, we've got this all wrong because digital loss protection is not digital loss protection. It's actually digital leakage protection. We don't want stuff to get out that shouldn't. The implementation inside of Office 365, Microsoft 365, automatically identifies many kinds of sensitive information, and it can warn users as well as administrators about potential sensitive information disclosure, whether that's a credit card number or a social security number, some sort of a federal ID number. The system can notify you that this is happening and help educate the users that it shouldn't. I mean, nobody really wants their social security number transmitted in an unencrypted email across the internet. That's not a great thing. But you could say that occasional slip-ups are probably going to happen, and I don't want to block everything, particularly when there may be some false positives. However, if there become a large number of these, it may make sense to actually block the user from sending the sensitive information. If, for instance, I had a list of corporate credit card numbers and I was trying to send them to my friend Joe or Joey, then, well, you might want to block that. The fourth and final recommendation I want to give you, the thing that I think that you can use to help move towards that sensible maintainability is implementing group naming restrictions. You probably already have one idea on why you might want to do that based just on the graphic. But there are two ways to do this inside of Office 365. The first is to set it so that only a specific group can create Office 365 groups. When you do this, you can build your own process for validating the need for the group, making sure that you have the appropriate backups, and any other kind of restriction that you want to make on creating a new group. And by the way, teams require groups, ergo, when you control the way that groups get named, you control the way that teams get named. The second way that you can implement this is to use the policy system that's already built into Office 365. The policy system supports some fairly basic things, but they're often useful enough to get you where you want to go. First, you can do blocked words, the kinds of words you would expect that you wouldn't ever want to see inside of a group name. The second thing that you can do is you can assign a prefix or a suffix to any of the groups created by users. Why this is important is it allows you to uniquely identify these were definitely created by a user versus these were ones that the administrator created. So with that, I'm going to move to questions. And what I'm going to do here is ask you if you've got any questions for me about how do we move to sensible manageability. And I would like to ask you, what are the things that you think that we should do immediately, all of us, so that we can get to that manageability? What are those things that are available to us that we just need to turn on? So I'm going to join you in chat right now.
All right, that is Robert Bogue. Robert is president of Thor Projects. Rob, thank you so much for your session today. I do have a few questions, and we may have some come in now as we are speaking. You warn us about going half in. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we didn't have a choice, right? Like we ended up with this situation where we had a paper process or a process that required some form of paper, and all of a sudden nobody's in the same place. And you know, if you've tried mailing anything recently, mail's not exactly working. Postal mail. So people would start to bring these documents in. They'd convert them to digital, but they didn't really know how to place them anywhere because they had always had a file folder sitting on their desk this went in. And so that puts us in this half-in situation where we really have a physical process, but we're executing it in an electronic world because we don't have a choice.
As you were talking, it occurred to me that, you know, we've had a great deal of disruption and impact over the last 12 months. Obviously, it's kind of seems self-evident, but it's very true. As you're talking, I was thinking, well, our content has been impacted, our technology and our people in one big morass of change and disruption. For those in our audience that are leaders of teams or perhaps of departments, now everyone is working from home. We have all these different ways of working. What's your advice for team leaders now that must now adapt themselves using either new technology or a new methodology with remote work, keeping their teams productive, connected on a human level? What is your advice?
Yeah, I think at a human level, I think the biggest challenge we've got, and it's totally, you know, more or less unrelated to the information management problem that we've got to deal with, but from a human level, we have a burnout problem. We are seeing mental health issues. You know, we're social creatures, and we cannot extract the need for social connection from our processes, from the way that we work. And so while Teams is something, it's not a complete replacement for being in the same room. If I was a leader, I would be looking for signs of burnout and looking for ways to help people address that burnout, more than I would be worried about, you know, did they get 3 documents done or 2? They're going to get roughly the same amount of work done.
Now, Rob, we have a question from Blaine. Most of our problem is the slowness of government to allow the use of the tools in M365. We're still waiting for authorization to use labels, and we've been in Microsoft 365 now for over a year. What's your take on that?
I think governments got hit really, really hard. You know, I think they were used to being face to face more than other organizations. They were used to keeping things in the walls, and so I don't want to justify the slowness. It's I agree it's a problem, and at the same time, I've got to give folks a little bit of runway for that, because I think that these are unprecedented times, and we don't know how to deal with them. I think keep asking the good questions about how do we appropriately manage our records, right? And how do we manage our sensitivity and our disclosures? And eventually the tools will float up under that kind of pressure.
Now, Rob, we're getting close to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I can't let you go without asking a bit about the AIIM change management courses that you have been involved with in designing and delivering. Clearly, we're under great times of change. Tell us a little bit more about that training program, what it is, and why it's valuable.
Yeah, the short is it's probably the most comprehensive training on change you can find. It's 11.5 hours of recorded content, 800 pages of student handbook, and it's super relevant now because we're in a situation where change continues to come at us quicker and quicker, and we don't really have much of a choice but to insist that we manage change better. I think all of us have recognized that there are things about the virus that could have been managed better. I'm not that's not politically worldwide. We could have done a better job. And it's the question becomes, how do you do that? And the course has some of the answers to some of those questions. It's a very practical, skills-based approach to how do you do change well.
All right, and you can find out more about AIM training, Confident Change Management for Information Professionals. There is a link in the chat section today, and you can certainly find it at aim.org/training. Robert Bogue, thank you so much for being with us today and for your input for our event.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, we are getting close to the end of our session today, but one last presenter we have. Well, we're going to hear from Microsoft themselves with Chris McNulty, Director of Product Marketing at Microsoft. Teresa, can we see that video now?
Hi, and welcome to Microsoft's presentation as part of the AIM virtual event, moving from rapid adoption to sensible maturity with Microsoft 365 and SharePoint. I'm Chris McNulty from Microsoft, and it is wonderful to be here talking to the AIM communities once again. At Microsoft, our mission is simple: to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. In a time of unprecedented change, one of our core scenarios for our customers is helping transform the quality of work and the ways that people work to improve well-being by integrating knowledge, expertise, and insights into the flow of everyday work. And we do that with a focused set of tools to drive knowledge into the apps people use every day, to connect people to communities of practice, to discover experts and have questions answered, to establish a culture that focuses on knowledge and on well-being, and of course to make sure all of that is run on a foundation of rich content services to capture individual expertise. When Microsoft speaks to our customers, as we have been for the past several years, as we've been modernizing content services, we hear over and again about the challenges of integration, about manual intensive document processing, about consistency in classification, and of course the need for strong compliance and security policy. Microsoft 365 has a broad range of solutions to help organizations move beyond merely storing files in the cloud to being able to take mature transformational steps moving forward. Late last year, Gartner, the analyst firm, published their content services platform Magic Quadrant based on the experiences that Microsoft has shaped across our customer base. We're really pleased with how we've been recognized by Gartner and by our customers. But we're not done. All of these rankings in the Gartner quadrants are based on the state of our product nearly a year ago. So the innovations that we have been rolling out over the past year as part of Project Cortex have not yet been reflected in this rankings, and we're hoping to have even more things to show you in the future. And we know that the payoff from investing in modernized content systems can be considerable, running from the millions into the tens or even more of millions for a typical organization, based on research that we published last month with Forrester, looking at the total economic impact of our knowledge and content services offerings, which we have described previously as Project Cortex. So I would like to introduce you to the first released product coming from that initiative, SharePoint Syntax.
Every day, our world moves faster. More to do, more to read, more to manage. You need to streamline to stay ahead. What if you could teach the cloud to read and organize your content, giving you time to focus on what's important? Introducing Microsoft SharePoint Syntax. Harnessing the power of the cloud, Syntax uses AI to organize your content. You can teach it to read your documents the way you do and recognize important information. Automatically tag content to find it more easily. Streamline everyday processes and tasks. Reduce risk and ensure your information is safe. Turn content into knowledge and overload into overdrive so you can get back to what's important. Syntax, content services that work the way you do.
So let's look at what a mature approach to driving usage and adoption across Microsoft 365 can look like with Syntax. Syntax, simply put, helps you capture your expertise into no-code artificial intelligence models to take those forward into an integrated system of content centers where those models can be applied to automate capture, ingestion, and classification services, and extended to our automation platforms such as Power Automate and our compliance suite. And compliance is a key part of our story because as content is being recognized and processed, we can automatically attach the appropriate MIP or retention policy based on the content that we see inside your documents. So all of that classification is based on a tradition which takes us back to our SharePoint heritage to the on-premises days. And we know that users do not like putting metadata onto documents. That's why we've introduced 3 new classification schemes inside of Syntax. One, to be able to apply OCR, text extract, and object recognition to digital assets such as images. And then 2 closely related sets of artificial intelligence to process information coming out of structured documents, such as forms, or unstructured documents, such as contracts or resumes. We base SharePoint Syntax on our heritage of document libraries, originally built for SharePoint. Libraries provide rich viewers for content that can be extended into Teams and into SharePoint browsers. We use responsive design and accessibility so those experiences look great on any device for document management, columns, search, and being able to carry forward behaviors like OneDrive to synchronize files to any device, and support for document management gestures such as file movement, copying, and bulk editing. That metadata has been significantly enhanced in Syntax with new tools to automatically extract content mapped to managed terms that live inside of your classification taxonomy, with reports against your term stores so you know what's out there, and new tools to publish content types around your organization, as well as import taxonomies from the industry standard SCOS. For content that lives outside of Microsoft 365, we have our content connectors. Your content connectors are able to reach out to over 130 sources from Microsoft or our partners, such as ServiceNow, MediaWiki, SQL Server, file shares, and more. That brings information into the graph to make it searchable, and also allows us to extend it into experiences such as topics and the rest of Microsoft 365. And you can also use the graph to integrate that external content into line of business apps or custom solutions. Syntax is also closely coupled to our compliance engine. And Microsoft 365 compliance is based on the idea of labels. Again, a special kind of metadata. Labels have superpowers. When retention labels are attached to content, they apply policies for record management or retention. And sensitivity labels do the same thing for security gestures such as DLP, encryption, and access policies. Labels can be applied interactively by your users, but they can also be automatically set by Syntax and plugged into the rich environment we have to manage information at scale with analytics and file plans so that you can have a comprehensive view of all of the information in your management schema. The end result of this is a system that allows you to manage metadata, retention, and sensitivity policies integrated into our capture and tagging engine for precision in search, in process, and in governance. So let's take a look at that in demo. So I'm going to begin with the fairly standard process of uploading some files. So I'm going to grab a few files here and upload them to what looks like a regular old SharePoint library. Except this isn't a regular old SharePoint library. This is a library that's been enhanced with syntax as part of our content center. We can see that the file is now being analyzed and processed. So let's see what's happening behind the scenes. I've built a model here inside of this content center, and let's take a look at what's going on. This model has been built to process a financial transaction document. I've had to upload a very small number of training documents, and we can take a look at one of those here. The documents I've uploaded are financial transaction documents from Woodgrove Bank, and I can use my manual expertise to read this document to look to see if the fees are in line on these transactions. But classifying and processing information manually is a tedious process and a waste of most people's time. That's why syntax is able to enrich content and move it forward into processing models. Let's take a look. Here's the model that we've built to process this particular category of transaction. You'll see I have to only upload a small number of documents that's out here. In the first step, I need to provide coaching to my model to show what is and what is not an example of a confirmation document. And I can walk through and just say whether or not a document is or is not a confirm. And you'll see I have a couple of negative examples. And these documents are analyzed by text so I can get a standard view of them. And if I wanted to open the original of the document, I could. But I've supplied enough information here to allow us to establish good accuracy and see what the model would do in the real world. Here, I can see documents that will be identified positively and negatively based on my classification. I could also do further testing against unclassified documents to make sure the results matched what I expected. Additionally, inside of a model, I can extract information such as settlements. Here, I go through and visually tag the section of the document where I have information that I want to pull out. I can also take a previously untagged document and choose the section of the document where I find the settlement. Once I've trained my model with at least 5 examples, I can see how it's going to work. And I can see, based on the patterns that I've established, what information is going to be pulled out and seeing if I have a good match. I can look over here on the right and I can see in green what the AI predicts it will match. And so we have a perfect match between what I've labeled and what the system thinks it's going to label. And I can add even more accuracy with explanations. I can look for patterns inside of documents, and I can also use a set of pre-built templates for standard patterns such as dates, times, postal codes, social security numbers, credit cards, currency, and more, to be able to pull those tags out of the document. Finally, I can set compliance policies on my document so that as I see new trade confirmations, I can specify a retention policy that should be automatically applied to that document using our labeling engine. Once the model is built, I can apply it to libraries throughout syntax content centers or SharePoint, and that model will be run anytime content is uploaded or changed. So let's go back and take a look at the documents that we uploaded in the first place. So now I can see all of my new documents that have been uploaded today have been processed. We've pulled out all of that metadata. And without my having to read or type anything in, all of the properties of that document, dates, currency numbers, tickers, amounts, values, and more, have been pulled out. Furthermore, I've used Power Automate to look for documents with unusually high settlements for further examination. So that's been a quick tour of some of the ways that syntax can drive additional maturity in how your organization approaches intelligent information management or content services. We have a broad roadmap. Syntex was released last fall, and we're continuing to invest in those technologies along with our investments in knowledge management, which will be released very early in 2021 here, along with even more innovations to come later this year. If you're looking for more assistance getting started with Syntex, with Cortex Topics, or Microsoft 365, our Content Services Partner Program members are ready to help. Our preferred members of the program, shown here, span the globe and have been trained extensively in our innovations for knowledge and content services, as well as having been recognized for a proven track record year in, year out, delivering success for our customers. There's plenty more information available about Syntex online at aka.ms/SharePoint Syntex. Demos, videos, white papers, announcements, and more. Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you, Chris. That is Chris McNulty, Director of Product Marketing from Microsoft. Thank you, Chris, for being part of our event today. Well, all right, it is drawing to a close, our event today. We have just a few things we'd like to give to you this afternoon as a closing, in our closing segment. What did we hear today? I know I was making a lot of notes as presenters were going through. I'm sure that you were as well. We started today with Peggy Winton from AIIM. Peggy did a great job, I thought, at summarizing some of the feedback and findings of the new Information Watch. If you haven't got your copy of the new Information Watch, Mastering Your Microsoft 365 and Microsoft SharePoint Investment, please do so. There is a link available in the chat portion of our event today, or certainly find it at AIIM.org. Peggy summarize some of the findings that were not necessarily so surprising. Every organization just about has Microsoft 365. It's how we address the disruption and the challenges and adopt the tools with proper planning. Peggy mentioned that it was sort of a mess, and I don't know if it's a mess. What are your thoughts? Certainly records and information are everywhere, and I was intrigued to see that folks are using Teams specifically, not just for video collaboration, but really as a hub, as a way to share files, as a way to collaborate on content, and often in processes that really drive the performance and profitability of every organization. So I thought Peggy's summary of the Information Watch and some of the feedback from the expert panel of CIP members was especially valuable as we launched into our program today. And then CreoSpark and Valo, Rez and Vlad helped us understand how the modern workplace is really moving to an all-encompassing platform of a digital experience using Teams, and helped us understand how Teams can facilitate both our digital communication and our collaboration needs as a hub. And I think that's an important strategic concept. As a hub, an application gateway to really working and collaborating and interacting with content, documents, technology, and people in ways that move the needle in terms of digital transformation. Michael Schweitzer, another great presentation. Perhaps not the most exciting or sexy topics, audit logs, but I found it to be exciting and sexy. Call me crazy. I didn't know enough about audit logs that really compile and provide a complete listing of all the user activities and actions for important documents and information. How powerful is that? It was great to understand a little bit more about what's included in Microsoft Audit Trails and what might be missing for compliance. Michael shared some of the gaps in Microsoft 365 audit logs and how to improve that. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And to me, as a leader, I want to know. I want to know what's out there. I want to know what's happening. I want to know how we're using information, how people are interacting with it, what kind of risks it exposes the organizations to, our organization, and what opportunities are presented. So how to save those logs even beyond the normal retention time and what to do with them, I think is in a powerful discussion. John and Dan from Helix, you know, studies show that 80% of information is in unmanaged repositories like file shares. And so it makes sense to me that we look at tools like AI to help manage that content chaos. But as Dan and John pointed out, that's only part of the solution. Certainly Project Cortex is a tool that helps us address some of the gaps in performance and using artificial intelligence and machine learning to intelligently categorize and share information to boost compliance. I'm still interested in understanding how we can, in addition to boosting compliance and security, improve our business processes and gain a competitive advantage. Perhaps we'll get a chance to speak about that in an upcoming event. Roland Reddick from Colligo, another great presentation today. He had a number of interesting things to say about accelerating, how we've been in this accelerated digital transformation environment over the last several months. And we've upgraded our liveware. I like that. Upgraded our people. And really the way that we can do that is to leverage the content management tools within Microsoft 365. He talked about finding diamonds in the dark data. I thought that was interesting. Diamonds in the dark data. What does that mean? What kind of risks are associated with that dark data? What kinds of opportunities are there? And ultimately, he talked about making it a joy, not a chore to comply with information governance processes and procedures. From RICO, Richard Freeman talked about how the speed of transformation has resulted in new business and operational challenges that have yet to be addressed. Our old friends and nemesises, personal emails. Don't talk to Hillary Clinton about using a personal email account. But certainly that is something that is happening today as workers go to remote work. That opens up a great exposure, and we should be considering how that may impact our organization. Home printers, another big area that is overlooked. Also an opportunity for risk and cyber intrusion there, and our continued reliance on paper. Indeed, it kind of took a pandemic for us to really move forward quickly with digital transformation. I loved Richard's historical perspective of the color TV taking however many years it was, but work from home only 2 months to adopt. So the design thinking model, I think, was very important as well. I want to point out: empathize, define, create an idea, do a prototype, test it, implement it. You know, that reminds me of the old TQM, Edwards Deming model: plan, do, check, act. So I think that was very important in that model, that design thinking model. I think is an important one to take away from his presentation. Andrew Cohen joined us last minute from ActiveNav. Thank you, Andrew, for being with us. He talked about leveraging the migration process and taking advantage of that effort. Indeed, maybe a lift and shift, but with a thoughtful strategy behind it. Again, astounding, at least in that one case study, 40% of information that was retained was obsolete or trivial. 12% was a duplicate. What is it in your organization? I think we might be all surprised to find that out. To me, migrating from one repository to another, it's a big pain. It may not be that exciting, but you know what? I think it is exciting because it is a grand opportunity to really do some interesting and strategic things in addition to the technology. My pleasure to bring Scott Miller, his book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. We talked about managing change, oh so important, as did Robert Bogue, with him joining us, the impact of teams on content, technology, and people, working to be sensible and mature in our migration and dealing with teams. Teams and change. Don't forget the AIIM change training program, now available, presented by Rob at aim.org/training. And finally, Chris McNulty, kind of putting a cap on everything for us today. It was great to have Chris join us as well. So in closing, I just want to say thank you for attending today. Where are we at? Microsoft Teams launched in 2017, quickly became a trusted collaboration platform. Clearly, as the pandemic spread, the adoption of Teams skyrocketed. Now what? It's pervasive now in nearly all of our businesses. While most of us think of Teams as something that we do using video and collaboration, since Teams makes it easy to share files and work on them together, many work groups and departments are now using Teams as their platform for document co-authoring and collaboration specifically. And it's important to understand that a great deal of critical information is created, shared, and stored within that environment. And it's critically important when we view it as a driver for operational improvement and optimization, as well as data security and compliance. I think both sides of those coins are important. So it's important that Microsoft Teams and all of the environment underneath the umbrella of 365 be an integral part of our strategies and our approach to information governance. And so I will leave us with the 5 recommendations in the new Information Watch. Get your copy today, but again, take advantage of the demands in remote work as a springboard for process improvement and optimization. Focus on Microsoft 365, the framework as a framework for governance. Reassess your approaches and our thoughts about third-party solutions. Be conscious and watchful about team content sprawl, and use the popularity of Teams as a springboard for process improvement. So with that, I'd just like to leave you with one last slide about AIM 21. Teresa, could we put that slide up now? If you're considering attending the AIM conference, you will be interested in our great early bird deals. Each month, those who register for AIM 21 with the all access or VIP level will receive a special thank you bonus gift. In January, and there's still time in January, you'll receive a free Foundations of Intelligent Information Management training course. That is a $299 value. You'll receive that free as part of your registration in January. In February, your free gift is a free career building workshop designed to help you excel in 2021, also valued at $299. And the earlier you register, the more gifts you get. By registering in January, you receive all of the monthly gifts as our thanks for registering for the conference. Enough said. It's going to be awesome. You got to be there. Find out more at aimconference.com. That's AIIM conference.com. And just in closing, some last minute housekeeping. Don't forget to look in the chat bar all day long. There's been links and discussion happening in there. You want to check it out. You want to download the agenda playbook and get to all the resources. And please take our feedback survey. Teresa and the rest of us at AIM, we'd like to know what you think, what's good, what's bad, what we could improve on, what you think is awesome. And finally, we'd like to thank our underwriters today, ActiveNab, Coligo, CryoSpark and Valo, Gravity Union, Helix, Microsoft, and Rico. Without the support of our solution providers and sponsors today, we could not bring you these value-added free virtual events. So thank you all for attending. We hope that we'll see you at AIM 21. Look for more AIM virtual events coming soon. So for Teresa Reddick and the rest of the team at AIM International, I'm Kevin Crane saying thank you so much. We'll see you next time.